Thank you so much for your presence here today. My name is Keisha Lobo, and it is my privilege to be your anchor for Gatekeepers of Governance Summit, organized by Excellence Enablers, a corporate governance and board advisory consultancy firm. Ladies and gentlemen, day one saw 6 exceptional sessions, and day 2, 3 to unfold. We begin the day with our plenary session, an embodiment of leadership. We feature a conversation between Mr. A.M. Nayak and Mr. Damodaran. Ladies and gentlemen, as we welcome our dignitaries to kindly join us on stage, may I request Mr. Damodaran to do us the honors and present Mr. A.M. Nayak with a bouquet of flowers as they come up onto stage. Looking forward to the start of day 2 with our plenary session. An embodiment of leadership. What an honor to have it with us this morning. An institution builder, a leader beyond compare. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us on stage, an embodiment of leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, a leader beyond compare, an institution builder, Mr. A.M. Nayak. What an honor. And with us, our host, our main gatekeeper, Mr. Damodaran. We've got this bouquet of flowers to welcome Mr. A.M. Nayak. Can we please have the bouquet of flowers? A session, an embodiment of leadership, ladies and gentlemen. Looking forward to this conversation between Mr. A.M. Nayak and Mr. Damodaran. I now hand over to Mr. Damodaran to take the session forward. Sir.
Good morning, friends. To me personally, this is a morning like no other, because I have been able to, it didn't require much persuasion, I must confess. I shouldn't take credit and say that, I tried very hard to get Mr. Nayak here, but his affection for me neutralized every other concern that he might have had. He doesn't go to these functions these days, so he's here with us. I will not attempt to introduce him. No. Because if I actually told all of you, and many of you know this, if I tried to mention his accomplishments, his achievements, the conquests that he has made in a long corporate journey, we will sit here till tomorrow evening. I don't want to do that. Let's just say that we have attempted to capture in 4 words 60 years of outstanding corporate excellence. We call it an embodiment of leadership. Mr. Nayak and I go back a long way. Let me say 2-3 other things, and then I will ask on your behalf and my behalf a few questions. And I can assure you that he is not one to hold back. You know that. He has on occasions called a spade a shovel. So he's not going to hold back. Let me say two things and then get started on the questions. One, many of you have seen the tagline of L&T over the years. We make the things that make India proud. Today, the man I present to you is the man who made the L&T that made the things that made India proud. He's also the man who personifies the other shorter, more crisp statement that L&T makes, which is, it is all about imagineering. So he moved L&T from engineering to imagineering. Going to places where no man has gone before. If you see the marshy swamps of where the Hazira factory now is, and some of us saw photographs of that, and then you wonder which man will really think in terms of taking up this land and building this kind of a, he is that man. But that's all I will say by introduction. I don't want to elaborate this. I'm going to ask him a few questions, and then we'll take it from there, right? So my first question, firstly, I must welcome you. I mean, it is such a pleasure, though you and I have known each other for ages, and I don't say this as a formality, but it's great to have you sitting on my right side here. Even in the L&T board, he sat on the right side. I must make disclosure here that...
when I need help, it is better to have a person on the right.
So he persuaded me to join the L&T board over a lunch. I said yes. And then I decided that I had possibly given the wrong answer. Because I'm going to do now what I haven't done before in all these years, and those of you who know me know that. I have a paper with me for this conversation. I normally don't use paper. The reason is when you go into an L&T board meeting, you better go prepared. You'll be hopelessly out of place if you're not prepared. So I said, continuing in that vein, I'm carrying a sheet of paper as an aid to memory for me to ask Mr. Naik a few questions. Right. So my first question, and this is a question that might not have occurred to you, but I must ask it nevertheless, is that over 6 decades of your corporate journey, and actually when you count in terms of numbers, don't look at years, don't look at months, you get to the hours and take 60 years and multiply that by 15 hours a day. So he's spent more than 100 equivalent years at work, right? So I haven't known of anyone in India or outside who has done that. So in this long journey, has it ever occurred to you, you wake up one morning and say, enough is enough, I've done such a lot, let me do something else? Has that thought ever occurred to you?
Not really, because I loved L&T so much. It has been my life.
Yes.
And when I was a student, I was looking for joining a company which is, of course, gives me an opportunity for technology innovations and engineering excellence and so on, but parallelly, it gives me a platform to be able to, on a wider scale, build up a nation, to help build up a nation. And that's what I used to think as a student, 21-year-old. And then, of course, I was not in IIT. Because my father decided to go from Bombay to the village and we all had to go. That was in 1952. And then, therefore, I could not go to IIT. Not that I could not have, but I didn't have opportunity. Can you believe L&T never called me for interview? So I joined a small company, but destiny brought me, it has been a long way, if I have to explain why and how I landed in L&T, but destiny brought me. And one Britisher interviewed me and then offered me a job, which was 40 rupee less than the previous job, But you know, I said I was passionate about L&T and I said yes. And he said, okay, 760 rupees in those days. Super by B was a grade. And then he said, but before I can commit this, you have to meet the old man. And the old man was nobody but his boss. He was not really old, he was younger than him. So it took me from first floor down to the Danish man, Mr. Hansen, his office, and while Baker would use the word bloody almost every sentence, he was a Scottish, and Hansen will speak very smooth and rhythmic English. I was in between. Neither went to the extent of bloody, but neither that. So Mr. Hansen and we possibly were for 15 minutes. So he asked me one question, how many people report to you? So I said 350, because I was running the whole workshop at the age of 22. He said, oh, that's a lot. It will take a long time before you can get such responsibility in Larsen Toubro. So I used to think in Gujarati and translate it into English. So if you explain in Gujarati, it doesn't look bad. But I said to him in English, who knows, time will tell. And he asked me to leave within 30 seconds, his room. So I came out. Within 1 minute, Mr. Baker came out, fuming like anything. And we went up back again on his first floor. His pet man, who was making proposal, estimating, costing, he met me and he was complaining to him about Mr. Hansen. He said, this bloody old man will never allow me to do what I want. At last I got a man. But you know now, he's coming in my way there also. He's telling all this in my presence. Then he took me to the room and he said, my sonny boy, now he's coming down to kind of convincing me. And he said, my sonny boy, you know, the old man says you are overconfident. In fact, he may have said something even more tougher than that, but he said overconfident. So he has only allowed me to give you 670, not 760. Not supervisory B, which was a supervisory grade, but DA plus basic, which was a union grade. So I said, don't worry, Mr. Baker, my life ambition was to join Larsen Toubro, or equivalent of that which doesn't exist in this country. So I'm going to join anyhow. He was relieved. As I went to the door to exit, he called me back. And he said, young man, work hard. And at the time of confirmation, I'll go and fight with the old man to get you what I promised, which means 760 supervisory, which he later on did it. But my life has been very lively from the day one in L&T. All the most difficult assignments Baker would give me because he had tremendous confidence. And I was only 22 and a half, you can say. So I had a terrific time with him, and of course through him to the whole L&T. And he was sitting in a cabin watching this way. And I was 90 degrees this way. So he would look this way, and I'm not in the seat. Every now and then he looks at that and I'm not in the seat. So he called his secretary. I'm talking about first 1 month. Where is this guy? Sir, he is all the time in the shop floor. Good man, he said. He wanted everybody to be on the shop floor. And he thinks people who sit in air-conditioned office are not the one who will get things done. If all the workers are working in such an inconvenient timing and going through such a lot of hard work, the supervisor and manager must also go through. Yeah, few people you may have, designer and so on. So he would not recruit a single engineer. We had a management training scheme, and in management training scheme, he would not, it's a company-wide scheme, but in his group, that is our group, he won't allow anybody. He'll tell Hanson, I want foremen. Foremen mean those who get things done on the shop floor. Of course, there is a up and down, very interesting stories I have, but today is no time to talk about that. But let me tell you, with all these interesting stories, I never thought about anything else but L&T.
Yes. So, with 16 hours a day work, 15 to
15.
16 hours, and then you go home and continue to think about L&T.
1 hour, yeah.
So, therefore, you really didn't. But you also played cricket, I am told, in your younger days.
Yeah, younger days sort of tried to play.
KV tells me you were a leg spinner.
I tried to be leg
But
spinner.
you know, people who are in the L&T board, like Mr. Chitale, Matthew and I, we have seen you bowl quite a few googlies in the L&T boardroom. So we are reminded that there must have been a leg spinner. Yeah.
You were also there.
Yes. No, I also watched the googlies.
So all the people,
Yeah.
they have only benefited with my googly. If at all I have thrown googly.
You trained them for the challenges.
Please bring a single man, and say, Mr. Naik, googly hurt us.
No, but it prepared people for the harder jobs, because if you play a good googly, then it prepares you for the challenges of life, isn't it? Have you ever feared failure at any time? What happens if I fail?
According to me, everyone should have a little bit of fear of failure that makes them strong for the next assignment.
Okay. It
So
doesn't
fear of failure is not a bad thing.
is not bad.
For a person who always is a great achiever and keeps his standard very high, if you are expecting to get 85 out of 100, but if your yardstick is 95 out of 100, you have a fear of failure. You may not get that 95. But then that fear of failure makes you work harder and harder, that I cannot fail. This is what I thought to myself, I cannot fail. And that made me and drove me always to achieve my targets. So I had a little bit of fear of failure. I have taken many bold decisions, and once I travel, which I think nobody in this hall or anywhere will do, that I had to leave Poland, where I had gone, and I was 34, at night, 9 o'clock night, through thick forest. And I was told that after 3 hours you will hit the border of Germany and there is a hotel and so on, but the driver who was with me doesn't speak a word of English. And in between he stopped the car and took his wife, which was my good luck. Because this guy was trying to unload me in the middle of the forest, and but I was tough with him. I said, I'm not going to get down from this car. Then his wife told him, no. There was another car waiting from Germany. He said, you go in that. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. After we came out of the pump, this was where we were filling the petrol. There were 2 policemen. They stopped the car, just 1 kilometer away. And they said, passport. They also can't speak any English. So I gave passport. He looked for a few minutes, peeped inside the car and so on. Then he said, you can go. Then he lost the way twice more. So I finally took away the map he was seeing. And I told him, you do what I tell you to do now. Turn right, turn left, turn right. So I brought him up to the border. He has not yet seen the the board, what town it is. Neither had I seen, but it was at least exit point. So you first cross the Poland border, they opened all my bags, and again I warned him, I am here not because I want to be here, I am here because the chairman of the Export-Import Organization of Poland has invited me. Shall I phone him? It was 4:30 in the morning. So he said, okay, you can go. 1 kilometer from there was the German border. So the German guys opened, and I told him, look, I am here to visit your Leipzig fair. Leipzig is where we wanted to go. Without troubling too much. But meanwhile, he unloaded his wife at the Polish border because she did not have a visa to go into Germany. So then we proceeded. 2 minutes from there, we saw a highway, and we saw Berlin instead of Leipzig. Then I saw left, it was Leipzig. And he jumped. Sir, Leipzig. So I said, even though it is Leipzig and straight road, you do what I tell you to do. Anyway, I came to hotel at 7:45. Everybody was looking for me. I telephoned. They came running. 8:38. Meeting was to start. Can you believe that 8:45 I was in the meeting, traveling whole night, and which I have done many times.
Those of us who know you know that you can do it.
Well, I mean,
life difficult for the rest of us.
You ask me whether you have faced any difficult situation. There is one where you get scared in that forest.
Absolutely.
And with the language not known, with two different countries, both that time East European, it was not, at 34 alone, it was not easy.
But if you had been unloaded there in the forest, you would have put up another plant there, I suppose.
See, unfortunately, they won't allow us to cut the trees, otherwise I would have attempted.
Okay. You must have heard this expression before and brushed it aside several times. What does work-life balance mean to you? I mean, all these people will be interested. 16 hours of work, 60 years in the same company. What would work-life?
Not 60, by the way, 53, because I'm a non-executive chairman.
No,
and you have been kind enough to make that 15 hours into 6 hours now.
That's correct, yes. No, we thought we owed you that much at least.
I'm thankful to you for that.
He is signaling, once I asked him a few years ago when he was moving from executive chairman to non-executive. So I asked him, I said, do you see yourself in a non-executive role? He laughed and he said, you've known me for so many years, is it possible?
But
so
you know,
now he makes an aggressive statement by wearing this dress to show that he is non-executive and that he has stepped off. This is signaling.
But by the way, this was meant for underprivileged people, because I am involved in now a lot of societal work, philanthropic work, charity work in the villages. So I go there every 2 months. And if you go in a too good a dress, they feel hesitant to approach you. You have to be looking like one among them. So the day I became a non-executive chairman, I had only 3 suits in any case throughout my life. So I stopped wearing them, and I had 5 T-shirts bought, and I started wearing it always white, not fancy with straps and so on. And even in a board meeting, non-executive chairman, I used to go in this T-shirt. AGM, I used to go in T-shirt. If there was a in-person AGM. And I made it a habit. Anything you do, you have to practice in such a way it becomes the way of life. So for me, it became a way of life. I don't feel hesitant to go anywhere in T-shirt now. Or I can wear a shirt. But I think it conveys a lot of messages.
Oh, yes.
And the message is not deliberate. It is not as if I must impress somebody, therefore I am doing this. It is directly to participate in what you want to do. In this case, I have now, in my philanthropic work, through my two trusts, Nayak Charitable Trust, which is education and skilling, and medical side, the health side, is I lost my granddaughter at 2.5-year age with cancer. So that is on the name of her, Nirali Memorial Medical Trust. And we have now 5 hospitals in this trust. And the last 2 where if there are a lot of people who come from abroad have gone there. And they have told me that, I mean, I'm not trying to please myself or to impress anyone, but they have told me there are no hospital better than this in US or England. Because my equipments are the best in India at least. And the building, if you see, they look so gorgeous that you feel like staying there, going and sitting there for 1 hour, 2 hours like that. Although it's a hospital. The Prime Minister of India opened that about 2.5 years ago. And then we have 6 schools in the Education Trust. And one of them is in Bombay. If anybody has a chance, you can go and see it. It is now one of the best of Bombay. We can't admit people. People are booking for next year. So, working in L&T, that is one thing you learn. Whatever you do, do the best. I do not have a single particle of dust in any of our hospital. I'm talking compound, not in the building, and the school. It is either the greeneries, lawns, roads, or building, but no dust. That is what we learned from L&T way of doing.
We've seen it. Mr. Chitli and I have gone and seen all the hospitals as well as the schools, and I was mentioning to Sanjeev, and Sanjeev is not here today, when we went to see that this is one time I wish I could roll back the years and get admitted to school, because now I know what I must have missed at that time when I went to school.
As long as you think of school, it is fine, but don't think of getting admitted in hospital.
No, you mentioned that the hospital was a very nice place. Hospital is phenomenal, equipment is phenomenal, and then you see the doctors, you get a little worried. They're so competent that you don't want to engage with them.
I know, but they will at least keep you going.
That they do, yes. Best to keep going outside.
Now, this is not enough. We have adopted 40 schools. Because they are all schools which are poor people's schools. The government has sanctioned the school, but then left it to them, and it is not done well. There are not many equipments. So in the adaptation, we make the schools much better than they were there. With the equipments, we brought computer for all of them, we brought English classes, and so on, and I meet all the 40 plus our own principals every second month, myself. Because I want them to know that I am approachable. Because my image until then was, oh, this man is too big, we can't even go near him. Now they know they can go near me. And I think that is the crux of the matter. People have to change, they have to transform. They have to understand that this is the new life. Every now and then we have a new objectives. So I am quite pleased with this work. In my 6 hours a day that I do now, 2 hours every day is philanthropy and charity work. For example, 3 days ago we decided to build 2 hostels. 175 for the girls and 117 for the boys, in two different locations. One has 85% backward class and scheduled class. One has 90% only tribal boys and girls, where my father was the principal for 8 years. And the village people treated him so well that when they came to me, I thought, okay, we'll make it for them. So I'm busy. Let me tell you, and I'm busy with great satisfaction. I said great 4 or 5 times. So I think that's the way the life goes.
Let's move to another area that interests you, which is mentoring of young people. What are the qualities you look for in a leader? So you mentored hundreds of officers who moved to higher positions. What do you look for to see the potential?
Well, I think one thing is the most important part. Let me tell you, you have in L&T, at least I can say, I used to think every day what I did yesterday. And then 1 hour, as he said, at night I go over it and say, this, say 4 or 5 things, I could have done better. Then in the morning as I was traveling, I recap that today I cannot make those errors. But then something else crops up and that becomes your way of life. And that's a continuous improvement program. So this is how you become self-made. Self-made person constantly learning and feeling we got to do this today and do better than yesterday. So that is one. Second is budget. I'm comparing it with all corporate aspects. Now, when I went, it was 6 monthly, midterm and yearly. Now it became quarterly. So the quarterly result we have to work on, yearly budget, and by and large L&T has been doing well. And I can only tell you that L&T market cap, which was 4,000 crore when I took over, is now 5,05,000 crore. And all in last 20 years. So in 20 years we have multiplied the market cap 130 times. So this happens only if you have devotion, passion, conviction and commitment. You only go to temple when you go for devotion. My temple has been L&T. I have slept many times. I could not go home back at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, going around in the shop because the discipline and other things were not good. And I slept on the table. Now, what all can I tell him to be a successful leader? I mean,
Any three things.
I'm giving you what can be a successful leader, although it may be very hard.
It's too late in life for me to learn, so anyway. But at least there are younger people in the audience who will learn this.
So I always say, you can't be devoted without passion. You got to have passion that I will go and keep and make sure I'm successful. That is a passion. But you can't have passion unless you have a conviction. And most people think big, they have a vision, and this is the story of 90% plus people, but only 5 to 10% can make it happen. And that is why I said commitment. Devotion, passion, conviction and commitment. If you can follow this, I can see by and large you will be always successful. So that is number 2 attribute. Number 3, first time in L&T in 2000, I started 5-year strategic plan. First time in the history of L&T. And I did very professionally. I have been thinking about it 2-3 years in advance, knowing that next turn is mine. on seniority, and L&T used to believe in seniority. I changed all that and I brought meritocracy. By the time people become general managers, they were 55 and retirement age that time was 58. So what have you left in them? 3 years of working, of leadership? So I said everybody who are the brightest of the bright must become the leader by 45. It did not become 45, but 48, 50, it is today. And then we see this, all of you must know that you have bunch of companies which are in consumer products. You have 7 companies today I know in petroleum and petroleum-related products. How many companies are in building infrastructure, projects, hydrocarbon, offshore, in the sea, under pipeline, nuclear reactor, aerospace, defense? Tell me how many. Only one. And that is Larsen & Toubro. Nobody else has been able to be successful. We have 4.5 lakh people. 2.75 lakhs are contract workers working at remotest places, most inconvenient places. Their life is tough. When I see that, then I said my 15 hours is not as tough as that. My father, who is my role model, was and has always been, he used to come from village to our house. Later on, for the last 15 years, he stayed with us. And he always used to show me a tower coming up next door. And he said, don't look up. He used to tell me, don't look up, look down. See that hut? When the tower is ready for occupation and people will start coming, these people don't know where is their next destination. When you look at that life, you will be very happy with your life. But if you keep looking at that, you will always be disappointed. Is it the life you want? Of course, all this is in Gujarati. So, you also got to have a good trainer, role model. And my father has been role model. He thought of always others. I'll give you a small example. But people, the best way to tell all of you is from these kind of small examples. And not theory. These are all hard truth. In 1992, I became a director on the board in 89. In 1992, he was staying with us. We brought him from village to our house in 85. And the villager used to come always to meet him, those who come to Bombay, because their sons and daughters or sister or brother, somebody was always in Mumbai, and they used to come and meet him. And used to say, your son is, you must be very happy, your son is doing so well. You must be proud of him. Now, the way I am saying is not where the conversation goes. It goes in Gujarati the way it goes. And then he say, I am very happy about him. One day in 92, he only time in my whole life he asked anything is this. In 92, he said, there is in an extended village, where there are 5 villages, in the center, there was a hospital coming up. And he says, if you can help them. They have no money. When he retired, he had 32,000 rupees. And of that, 25,000 he gave in that hospital on the name of his father. I witnessed all that. And then he tells me, so he thought I'll give another 25,000. By the time I had worked for 30 years, I saw my bank balance. In 30 years, it was 2.6 lakhs. I asked the organizer, what are you going to do? He said, we are going to make the whole first floor and we need 4 lakhs. If you give 4 lakh, we'll put whoever's name you want. Then I went, in those days, I think Mr. Chitle will know, we could withdraw from our Provident Fund account, but we have to repay in 4 years. So I withdrew 1.4 lakhs. Of course, I repaid by 98. Repaid meaning my own money, but you have to put back into Provident Fund account. Made 4 lakhs and gave it to them. And today that hospital is 100-bed hospital in a village, and it is on my grandfather's name. Now my father came to know me immediately, within minutes. And he called me, you know what he did? He went through my passbook, did that. Because it is beyond his imagination that I can pay 4 lakhs just like that. How can I have 4 lakhs? And then when the villagers were coming, and they were saying the same thing, you must be very happy, he's doing so well, you must be proud of him. You know what he said? I am not only very happy with him, but I am very proud of him. Because he thought of others and not himself. Now when you have this kind of value system, character, hierarchically for 3-4 generations, this goes on from my grandfather. 120 years ago, he was a gold medalist in old Gaikwad state. You know, 1,000 kingdoms were there and Sardar Patel combined together, all that story you know. So, the point I am trying to make, because he has said, how did you learn leadership? The leadership, I did not go for MBA. I have been BE. I haven't done any study beyond Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering. I did not go abroad. So, 90% of the learning is self-made. You observe, you read what happens in your surrounding, and you pick the best out of it, learn from it, and that is your best teacher. So, I think for me, my 120 years of, you can say upbringing, where we always thought of others. I'm not talking myself, my grandfather and my father. When I went back from Bombay, you know, I was 10.5-year-old. I told you my father went back. And my grandfather, in old days, some of you may know, there was a Gurukul system of education. And my grandfather used to walk 8 kilometers, which was the nearest Gurukul school. And Monday to Friday he will be there, Saturday at 2 o'clock he will start walking back and come back by 4 o'clock, and by 5 o'clock he was in the farm. And early morning on Monday at 5 o'clock he will start walking again, and 7:30 he is at the door of the school. When he comes back that evening, that is Saturday evening, he goes to tribal colony, we'll call it scheduled caste and so on. And their hut is basically, it's not a house, it's a hut. And there were verandas which were made out of gobar and so on. And he will sit there. And 15, 20 children will come running, saying, Bapa has come, Bapa has come. I used to watch all that. Then he used to wear a long coat. He will pull out in one anna, if anybody knows that there was a one anna, 100 peppermints were available. So he used to buy 100 peppermint and distribute to these children. And you should see that I still remember how much happy they were. For what? Little peppermint? All of you should realize that the poor people's expectations are very low. All of us can do something, and you will not feel a pinch in your house, but in your pocket, but you will feel that these people, you can see them smiling on their face, so satisfied. This is my upbringing. This is when I came back from Bombay. Your question I'm answering different ways.
It's the best way to answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I've seen my father. I told you about the hospital. And I told you also that he gave me an example of the tower and the hut down below. Now, these are the best lessons you can learn in life. And absorb and take the best out of it. And practice it. Around which you build your value system and character. According to me, that is the most important requirement to be a leader.
So I want to take you to another theatre, which is, and I'm inspired by the presence of Rama here. You were chairman, I am Ahmedabad for a few years. How do you think management education should be reoriented to meet India's...
Nobody can explain better than Rama.
No, that is why she chooses not to speak at our conferences, but anyway.
Well, I had a good fortune of 4 years in IIM Ahmedabad. She also knows why I left. My term was 6 years, but I came out 2 years before. By the way, Prime Minister asked me twice at different occasions. His question was, why did you come out of IIM Ahmedabad? And I came out, I don't want to tell now, on a ground of principle. And I think what I find in a management student, not necessarily IIM only, but a management student, that they are not in tune with what all I said. I said it practical, what happens on the ground. And that has been the way I built my own personality or character or qualities. I think that practical application, what society wants, is somewhat lacking. You send them as a part of the education that in your curriculum you put 3 months for them to go to the villages, which is where Gandhiji used to say India lives. India lives in villages. By the way, that is why my father went from Bombay to the village, because Gandhiji said so. He cried. I've seen him cry twice. When Gandhiji died, he cried. So, and he went partly because of that. I would not say only because of that. So, I think application of what will eventually be faced by these MBA graduates and management students as they go in life is something which grounding of that requires somewhat better to be done. I had a good fortune of that grounding from that 10.5-year-old boy going to the Adivasi colony with my grandfather, to my father continuously reminding me that look down what the poor people are compared to you. That builds a character in a person. So a lot depends on the upbringing, where the character comes. In terms of IIM Ahmedabad or any management schools, I would say it's a great institution. They are required from the point of view of learning what should really, in terms of knowledge that they must have. But that won't make them, see, they are also supposed to make them leader. But they don't make them great leaders. If you see all management 90% of the management graduates, they are either in finance, banking, consumer product, sales, marketing, business development. You won't find even 1% to go in L&T and slog in Himalayas. You want them to learn? Send them to L&T and send them to Himalayas.
So they prefer the ACPC arrangement.
You know, we make guns like Bofors, exactly like Bofors, but much better version. We made 100 of them. They need to be tried out in the desert of Rajasthan. Our boys, and there are 1 or 2 girls, they stay in a camp for 1 month, 2 months till the trial is over. That's a real, in my view, the future technology-based leaders. They are not IIMs. Not that they can't be, but the IIM's broad understanding is we are in strategy, I'll be able to give consultation to so-and-so man. I should not say this, but I'm telling you my experience. First 5-year plan I did with BCG. And the name was Project Blue Chip. And that is the time we verticalized to focus on individual business, the company. Second 5-year plan was with McKinsey. And we also brought one more company, Bain, but in L&T Finance. But I met them all and very often, and I used to ask them, why don't you take out of my 12 division 1 and run it? I asked BCG, I asked Bains, I asked McKinsey. And since we have one McKinsey man on the board, yes, you should ask him tomorrow. Do you know that for last 23 years I have not been able to convince them? No, that's not our... Then suddenly the successor to the person in our board, he said, yes, I will take one vertical. After 1 week, he backed out. Because what he is telling, he has to prove it is same thing what he said can be done.
It's easier to preach.
Now you tell me whether have I answered you or not answered you.
See, what this audience wants is to extract the lessons. Now I want to take you to another interesting place. You battled, when I say you personally, because nobody else did that, battled 2 large corporate groups which were trying to take over L&T. And then you set up this employee trust. How did this entire thing occur to you?
I think you are asking me a secret of what I did.
Yeah.
But I think...
You don't have to share the secret sauce, but tell the story.
Open secret is not what possibly can be stated on that incident. But yes, from 1987, it's a long story. Our chairman, then Mr. N.M. Desai, there was a person called Chhabaria, I'm sure you knew, and he bought 4% of L&T shares. And I think strategically, stage managed, whatever, I don't want to go into it, somebody came and scared the hell out of Desai that now Chhabaria is going to take over L&T. So Mr. Desai went to Dhirubhai and told him, we don't want to give this to foreigners. Chhabaria was in Dubai. How should I go about, what can you do? Parallelly, Reliance had through BOP Fiscal Services, which is a subsidiary of Bank of Baroda, and there was a chief executive called Ferwani. And they had picked up 18% of the share and kept, which was bought over by Dhirubhai. Now there is a hard truth, so I can't tell you on some of it, but the long and short of it is, Dhirubhai became a chairman, and Mr. Desai, I would use the word outstayed. Now, the man who goes for a help to him was outstayed. But anyway, that's a corporate world. I mean, things happen if you don't have competence. I would say that. He was a lawyer, very nice man, very kind man. He just died about 8 months ago at the age of 100. But the only man who went and saw him every 3, 4, 5 months was myself for all the years. And if I don't go, he'll forth. And last 2, 3 years, he could not even make a proper talking. So he tells his son, phone him now. Tell him I want to see. And I used to go. So he was a kind man, nice man. But being a lawyer, I think he may be more oriented towards how legally it is done than how practically it is done. Anyway, this went on. VP Singh became a Prime Minister. One thing I must tell you, that L&T is always in the eyes of the Prime Minister. That is one advantage. So VP Singh...
Prime Ministers build India, L&T builds India, this competition, isn't it?
I mean, the point is sometimes Prime Minister retain their job because of us. So, VP Singh became a Prime Minister. By the time Dhirubhai was 1 year as a chairman of L&T. And VP Singh and Gandhi family, you know the relation. And Dhirubhai was made this facilitated by Rajiv Gandhi. So, VP Singh removed Mr. Ambani. Then there was no chairman. Then VP Singh brought after 6 months Mr. Ghosh, the ex-State Bank chairman. D.N. Ghosh. By the way, one thing I must tell you, because it's one of the questions, is having relationship. It is not yet come, but...
I was holding it for the end.
But D.N. Ghosh or Dhirubhai or anyone, can you believe each one of them had faith in me? Among all the executives. I'm talking topmost board members. Sometimes one man may not have that much, but we live with it. Now, within 1.5 years, VP Singh was ousted, and Chandrasekhar came. He was there for only 6 months, but one job he did, He ousted Ghosh. Whether he ran the country or not, I don't know. And before he could bring back Dhirubhai, Chandrasekhar was ousted. And then that story went on, and this became an issue which was quite... There had been many steps that we have gone through in this whole story, including proxies in the this thing. I don't want to go into it. But there came a time in 99, let's say 2000, Vajpayee became Prime Minister. as I told you, our future is always linked to PM. And I think Ambanis may have thought. My relation, by the way, is superb with them. Superb with Birla also. That is another story I'll tell you. They are the people I fought hardest, particularly the last one, Birla's.
I was going to anchor my relationship question on that. You ousted two of these people and maintained great relationships. How do you do that?
No, if you are, I'll tell you after this. So, now they were so closely linked to Congress. And BJP came. And with proper majority. So they are going to stay for 5 years. So now, Dhirubhai said, "Bhai, bahut ho gaya abhi." We are becoming very big in our area of competence. So they sold it to Birla. One more thing, we were naive. I can tell you, we were naive. We were not shrewd enough. I'm talking about me included. We thought Ambani's had at least 28%. Now, we could have easily got it that they have only, at one time, 4%. And when they sold it to Birla's, quietly they built it up to 10.5%. When they declared, and 10.5% was sold to Birla, and Mukesh and Anil, who were on the board, went away, and that position was taken by Mrs. Birla, that is a mother, and the Kumar Birla. And then the real story started of direct confrontation. And that went on for nearly 1.5 years. They said many board meetings were standstill. I came to know that Mr. Birla basically wants cement. He doesn't want engineering and this khatpat of, as I told you, going to Himalayas and desert and doing all kinds of things. If there is a simpler way of making money, why do this? So, I said I can't give cement. In fact, Daswant told me, the finance minister. By the way, I was taken to Mr. Bajpai. Huh? One thing is that in this fight I saw all Prime Minister. And he, I think Title was there or not, but you have seen my village. You have seen my house, where my upbringing was. Now, man who came from such a small house, small village, comes to the corporate world of Bombay where all kinds of Chanakyas and everybody is there. And to be able to protect yourself is difficult. There is a question of aggression. But someone took me to Mr. Bajpai, and one thing God has given me, that if you introduce me anybody one time, I think I persuade that person 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, and finally build relation with him. Work will be done if you have relationship. But that's not our objective. Building relationship is our objective. And that's a parameter of any successful businessman. So, I said, fine, we will invite competitive bidding, cement. And one company, Blue Circle, the largest cement producer of England, they gave me the offer. So I had a strong hands. I had an offer in my hand. So I told the government I can't do it. Mr. Bajpai sent me to Mr. Advani. I tell you, little lighter moment also are required while we talk. I went and met him. And he said, you are from Larsen & Toubro. You know, when I was doing the canvassing for the election, my haddi and pasli, he did like this, were being broken. And suddenly I came on a glass road, smooth road. I never had experienced that. So I asked the driver, how suddenly the road which was so rough has become smooth? So the driver said, Larsen Toubro built it, sir. So he told me this story instead of solving that other problem. Now, after about 10 minutes, hearing the story, Sambalpur to Rourkela, that is the patch which we had built. After that, I went out and I told XYZ with whom I went, I said, what did we achieve in this meeting? He said, we always achieve. One more step is clear, he said. You have met him, but I told you meet him. So now we can go and meet who we want to meet. So we went to George Fernandes, NDA chairman. Believe me, because he was a socialist, his leaning was always towards common people, not the industrialists. He helped me a lot. And he is the man who virtually took me to Jaswant Singh in his room. And he told Jaswant Singh, these people are a good company. They are doing my defense work. We are doing very little that time. But still, therefore, it is a company we as a nation cannot give it away, he said to Jaswant Singh. Now you find out what to do, but please make sure L&T is not given away to anybody. These are the words George Fernandes used. You want to know now the basic thing he said how. So I have gone through all this. Then Jaswant Singh told me, I understand Mr. Birla wants cement. In my first 5-year plan, I had declared that we want to sell cement. It's not our core. Our core is engineering, manufacturing, projects, and so on. So I said yes, but how do I decide the price? I am also answerable to my few lakh shareholders. I can't give it away. There must be competitive bidding. So Jaswant Singh, between you and me, was a Raja and therefore didn't understand all what was going on. So he tells the finance secretary now, Narayanan, and tell him, why don't you find something, cement can get a good price and L&T can sell it to Birla. Mr. Nayak has agreed. But how to find out that which is a good price? So there was a credit agency called ICRA. So ICRA was appointed for price discovery. After 3 months, ICRA came up with price discovery of the L&T as it was, not cement separated yet, combined, 310 rupees. The market was 160, 70 rupees. About that. But they were liberal and they made it 310. Now, Narayanan said, you and Birla sit together and decide how much is cement and how much is your engineering. That is a big issue now. Birla will say, mine is very little because you are losing money. I will say the maximum money and the maximum assets are in cement. In engineering is a light on capital. This 4-5 meeting went on. This was not in the board, outside of board. Then finally he was very, very clear he wants that cement. I was very, very clear that I cannot give, I have one condition, that if I give you the company, you will keep cement, you will demerge, and you might sell engineering to somebody else. There were rumors, I don't want to say to whom. So I said, you will have to, I told just one thing. I said, sir, one condition only I'll put, apart from price discovery, I have to get engineering shares out of Mr. Birla with us. And that too, I said I want now to ring-fence L&T for future. That this what we have suffered from 87 to 2003, 16 years doesn't happen ever again. Largely, I would not say impossible. That is how Birla was told, you want cement, keep cement. L&T will demerge the company. I did not demerge completely, I did partial demerger. We wanted to retain 25%, which we sold later on, made some money on it. My average price of expansion of 5.5 million I did, can you believe, was $19 a ton. And ICRA's pricing, whatever I negotiated, I got $85 a ton. That time, as a young man, not that bad, you know. So,
Younger. You're still young. You were younger.
I think you all thought that I'm become too old now, so let it be that way. Now, between me and Birla now had no choice but to work out price and partially demerge. Otherwise, Birla doesn't get cement. So, he started saying there are a lot of losses in cement, which was a fact, negative EVA. So he said price is, cement should be out of 310, 120, 120. He worked out some, what does the loss and negative EVA means and so on. So I told Mr. Birla, I am not interested in all your calculations. I didn't say I said in a very gentle manner. Let's be practical. I have worked out I can't pay you more than 105, my price, engineering. Then we negotiated. He went up, I went. When he went up 10 rupees, I went up 5 rupees. And finally, we met at 140 rupees for engineering and 310 minus 140, which is 170 for cement. So he moved up from 120 to 170. I moved up from 105 to 140. And the deal was struck. Now, how do I buy this? I don't have money. We are engineers. As I told you, my 30-year bank balance was 2.6 lakhs. And I wanted this share to be with employees' trust only, not with L&T. Then we are not protected. It will be traded in the market. So finally, again, Jaswant Singh had to tell through the secretary that tell the institution that this is the only way it will be done. Now, 275 crore, government told through institution L&T to give a loan. I did the structuring of the demerger, I did the structuring of the foundation forming and negotiation. And by the way, when the negotiations are over, Birla got up. I also got up. He shook hands with me. And he said, every time the history is written about L&T, Mr. Naik, I assure you, your name should be in golden words. He said, you saved L&T. This is what he said. He was gentle enough to finally accept that.
I have seen that at very close quarters because when the deal was finalized, it was done in the Unit Trust of India boardroom. Because we were shareholders on both sides and we made it easier for them to meet on common ground at that time. That's when I saw Mr. Naik up close and personal and told myself, never get into a boxing ring with this man. So I think it's been an interesting journey. 1 hour, you simply cannot do justice. But
this is, by the way, a long story, but we stop now. I'll take his next question.
Yeah. No, I'm only going to make a comment and stop. I'll spare you any further questions. And
You will not make any further question? Or you have?
Somebody's put up something there, that's why I'm worried. Yeah.
Oh, time is up. Okay. We'll take the opinion poll, whether you want to hear more.
If he is willing, at next year's summit, we'll schedule half a day for him. Right? But I only wanted to say 2 things at the end.
By the way, I want to answer your one question only.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Then the time is up.
We'll ignore it.
Now, he asked, all these fights that you had, unfortunately, how did you manage your relationship with both the industrial house? They were our biggest customer. Reliance will want everything to be done by L&T. And we built Hajira plant, we built Patalganga, we built Jamnagar refinery, Jamnagar petrochemicals. You have seen this beautiful geo in front. Mukesh told me one day you go and see the span of the building. There is not a single pillar. Your people have done it. You go and see it. Now, how do we keep good relation as a customer? Similarly, whether it is the aluminum or cement or any other, Birla wanted only L&T to do it. One of the reasons they wanted at least Reliance to take over L&T is to build all their plants. Partly, I will not say fully, partly. Now, how do I keep relationship and fight? Relationship and fight. That's his question. I think a lot depends on sympathy you get while fighting also. I don't want to tell you some silent points of this, but I have had all of those which you can think of. And I used to be very respected. But there was an issue on which we had agreed and not complied by one of them, let's say who I don't want to tell. So I went to the court. 3 years we fought on the court. Then I got a call one day by the intermediate lawyer, Mr. Naik, and we split half and half. It was only 0.8% shares, which was not given to me, which was supposed to be given. So finally, I agreed 0.4% and 0.4%. So in 2008, we got that 0.4%. And as I said, I behaved never aggressively in all these. I acted aggressively, but I didn't behave aggressively. Second thing, believe me, both had, I should not say myself, terrific respect for me. Terrific is an understatement. So when you have that kind of respect for what you do, how you demerge, how you have created the employees' trust, how you negotiated to get 275 crore, then we pledged all the shares to Citibank and took 150 crore and total price was 425. We gave and took the 14.95 shares. Today we are 17%, the biggest shareholder of L&T. And this is what Harvard has asked me, Kellogg has asked me. He said, tell me how from zero you got 62,000 crore shares. I said, that is a very great secret. You are a management guru, you should tell me.
That's a very interesting, good note to close that story. I'll just make two comments. Now you know why he's named Nayak, leader. There's no further explanation. The second is a personal story. I've told him this. When I was chairman IDBI, I was a member of a jury to select India's best manager for the year. And finally, after a lot of discussions, it came down to two names. I had kept my counsel. I didn't volunteer any opinion. All the celebrities on that jury expressed their views, and then Jamshed Irani, who was chairing that, said, you haven't said anything at all. What is your choice between this? I said, the other man is great, there's no doubt about it. He's an inheritor. Mr. Nayak is not an inheritor. He's one that built it ground up. But most important, and I want to say this and close, is I said that I wish nobody did it to him, but if somebody actually skinned him, you will find L&T written beneath his skin. And with that identification, clearly I don't want that he should lose. He has won, I think, 85 awards so far.
Now it has become 89.
89 awards. This was one of his first 2 or 3. So I'm sure now he's lost count. I think 89, yesterday Kohli got out also, I think at the same score. Somewhere thereabouts, all leaders, I think, as they approach 100, have an issue. But thank you very, very, very much.
Sir, will you allow me to speak 2 minutes?
Of course, of course. Yes. I'm not saying anything. I've finished.
Every time I was thinking, I had 2 pockets. One pocket is I must get L&T, whatever it means. Not get, not allowed it to go. It had almost gone, almost. And second pocket said, they are my best customer, I can't lose them. The only thing is the left-hand pocket was little heavier, that L&T cannot go. 2017, my book was released in the Nationalist. Mukesh came and he spoke gloriously. My second book now is coming, The Man Who Built Tomorrow, A.M. Nayak, The Man Who Built Tomorrow. That is decided by distributor, the title. And there are 6 people who have written forward. One is forward written by Mukesh. And he used to tell others. He said, I have seen many professionals, not the owner's children or brother or sister, but the man who can fight for his company as if it is his own is only one. A.M. Nayak. His word, the man whom I fought with. You wanted to know. Birla, I'll tell you, like he said, there was a panel deciding the business leader of the year award. And he was chairing it, Birla was chairing it. This is what I am told by the magazine. And then this, one of them said, Mr. Birla, you have a great experience with Mr. Nayak. What do you think yourself? Everybody had said what they wanted to. And Mr. Birla says, if you tell me about what our experience has been, I don't think this award can be denied to him. It rightfully should go to him, the man I fought. It's a rare, you cannot realize how rare it can be that you fight tooth and nail save your company, and still be retaining my two best customers. Now on that note, you can close.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. A.M. Nayak. What an honor, a leader beyond compare, an institution builder, sir. A caricature for you to remember your time here today.
Fantastic.
And this is a certificate, 10 trees planted in your name in the Sundarbans. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Damodaran and Mr. A.M. Nayak, we want to capture this special moment and a huge round of applause, a standing ovation. How much better could this be?
Can somebody remove this?
After that incredibly powerful session, ladies and gentlemen, so many knowledgeable gems to take away. Thank you, Mr. A.M. Nayak. What an honor and a privilege for all of us to be here in the room in front of you. The plenary session, an embodiment of leadership. Thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you take your seat, we're looking forward to that conversation continuing. But right now, our next session, right here today, ladies and gentlemen, we're setting the stage. The stage is set, ladies and gentlemen. Gatekeepers of Governance, our next session today after that phenomenal, powerful session. What a privilege for each and every one of us to be right here in the same room as Mr. A.M. Nayak and listening to him for over 90 minutes. That was simply amazing. Thank you so much, Mr. Damodaran, for that conversation. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our next session is Corporate Governance and its Punching Bags. That's the session we're moving into. When things go wrong with any corporate entity, it is normal to attempt to identify those that contributed to the downfall by acts of omission or commission. Rating agencies, auditors, and the stock exchanges have emerged as the favorite punching bags of the commentariat. Is there more to this than meets the eye? Are there more sinned against than sinning? Ladies and gentlemen, requesting you to please join us as we welcome on the stage our panelists. Our first panelist right here, Mr. Ashish Kumar Chauhan, is presently the Managing Director and CEO of National Stock Exchange, NSE, which he helped to form, and where he worked from 1992 to 2000. Prior to becoming the Managing Director and CEO of NSE in 2022, he served as the Managing Director and CEO of BSE from 2009 to 2022. He is known as the father of modern financial derivatives in India. He also created several path-breaking frameworks, including the Nifty Index, NSE certifications in financial markets. He is on the SEBI Committee for Corporate Governance and an advisor to the Asia Pacific Investment Council and the Central Board of Direct Taxes. He was also involved in conceptualization of the National Securities Clearing Corporation, NSCL, and the initial setup of the National Securities Depositories Limited, NSDL. Ladies and gentlemen, our first panelist joining us on stage, please put your hands together for Mr. Ashish Kumar Chauhan. Our next panelist to join us is Mr. Amish Mehta, the Managing Director and CEO of CRISIL, a position he has held since 2021. In 2014, he joined CRISIL and was appointed as its President and CFO, and in 2017, he was named the Chief Operating Officer. In the latter capacity, he led CRISIL's acquisitions and change agenda while creating a growth path for the businesses he managed. Prior to joining CRISIL, he was the CFO of Indus Towers. He has a rich experience of over 2 decades in telecommunication, oil and gas, FMCG, and business advisory services, and has held leadership positions in BP, Castrol India, EY, and Exxon Mobil India. He is a member of SEBI's Primary Markets Advisory Committee, FICCI's Capital Markets Committee, and CII's National Committee on Financial Markets. Ladies and gentlemen, an applause. Put your hands together for Mr. Amish Mehta. Welcome, sir. And joining us, our third panelist to complete our panel on stage, Mr. Aniket S. Talati, was elected as the President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, ICAI, for the term 2023-24. Earlier as council member since 2016 and as vice president in 2022-23, he was highly regarded for his organizational skills and his insight into the affairs of the profession. He was the chairman of the Financial Reporting Review Board, FRRB, and the vice chairman of the CSR Committee, and the convener of Digital Reengineering and Learning Directorate of ICAI. He chairs ICAI's Research Wing and Accounting Research Foundation. He has represented ICAI and India in several conferences across the world. In his present role, he interacts with the Government of India to improve professional standards. Ladies and gentlemen, joining our panel on stage, put your hands together, Mr. Aniket S. Talati. Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel is ready. We're looking forward to us ringing the bell, making sure our audience joins us right here in the main ballroom. And our moderator of this session on corporate governance and its punching bags, handing over right now to Mr. Amish Mehta. Sir, all yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to speak after Mr. Nayak. And it's a tough act to follow. I'm honored to have 2 esteemed panelists, who are extremely renowned in their own areas and need no mention. So let me, try and maybe give some opening comments on corporate governance and its punching bag. As you can see, I'm working for CRISIL, Ashish Bhai, leading National Stock Exchange, and then you have Mr. Talati, who is the President of ICAI. Today morning, all of us would have seen the newspaper talking about FTX, cryptocurrency, Sam Friedman scam, right, or fraud, whichever way you want to call it, and he's been declared guilty. Cryptocurrency, completely new, few years back, hardly anybody knew what was happening. An exchange was set up. People made money, suddenly people lost everything. And, here you have a complete exchange which has gone down. In India, you had a large unicorn which had questionable practices, being asked questions about how they were doing certain things, how they are bringing out certain things, what are the disclosures. And I think there are many examples, even on the global side. I spoke about FTX. There was a similar unicorn in Singapore, again, similar questionable practice. And I think these are happening all over the world. Times have changed. You clearly see with what's happening on social media, lot of new things coming up. The entire digital infrastructure in India has opened up. The payment scams, if I was to use that, or virtual scams which are possible, identity thefts, cyber frauds. I think we are completely witnessing a change in the landscape, both India and globally. And I think there are new types of institutions coming up. There are new types of corporates, newer entities. I think we had Nitin Kamath yesterday, newer mutual funds, newer exchanges. So I think there's a complete change in landscape which is coming about over the last few years. And the pace of change is very fast. You have different risks which are being called out. You have the geopolitical risk, of course, which everybody is looking at right now. But you have cyber, with all digitization, automation, you are looking at other forms of risk which are coming up, and challenges for institutions like rating agencies or for firms, professional firms. How do you keep pace with some of these changes, the pace of change which is happening, the disruption which is happening on business models? How do you ensure that you are staying ahead in the game and you are able to really set the standard but not be a follower, but you are a leader? I think the question which comes up for some of us as institutions which are regulated entity, where do you set the expectation for yourself? What is it that is expected by stakeholders? What is expected by regulators? What is expected by investors? What is expected by corporates? How do you look at entities who are having a responsibility maybe beyond the client relationship? So it's just not the relationship that we have with our clients, but there is a larger onus, larger accountability that is expected out of companies like us and other institutes which are there. And how do you measure yourself in that background, in that backdrop? I think clear challenge is lack of awareness, education, and we sometimes have the entire thing about disclosures and disclaimers, and I think it's an important element of how we put things out. How do you read a report? How do you read a rationale? How do you read some of the things which are put out by companies? What are some of the disclosures? What are some of the disclaimers? What are some of the criterias? Do you look at it in entirety, or you're only looking at the part which is disclosed and then making a decision without understanding the entire structure which might be there? I think from our perspective, I think clearly interest of shareholders, investors, and the larger ecosystem is extremely important, and that is the ask that we hold ourselves accountable to. It's just not the client relationship, but the entire ecosystem which depends and looks at the work that we do. Corporate governance continues to be in focus. I don't think anybody needs to be told that. I think we continue to be on that journey. And I think regulators have been setting that bar high every year, either due to what has happened or just that they want to be in the forefront. If you look at some of the changes which have happened on related party transactions, we have seen issues which have been highlighted in the past. There is a lot of change which has been driven on how you call out related party transaction. Accountability has undergone change. Disclosures have been enhanced multiple times, right, in the last few years. You need to talk about materiality. A lot of us, qualify materiality. You can hide behind materiality with a qualitative statement. How do you define materiality? And SEBI has now said, listen, I want a very quantitative number prescribed. So they have set up a limit in which you have to set your materiality. Because people are taking advantage. Maybe they are trying to use the leeway which is given. And I think there are many instances that we have seen in the past which points towards possible challenges in terms of disclosure and how we come across, and how we put things across. I can give you another example about form versus spirit, and I want to talk about this. How do companies or institutions like us think about regulations? Are you trying to do it in spirit, or are you trying to just meet the form? And we look at women directors as classic example. I keep looking at more than 50% of companies are still having only one woman director on their boards. They are having only one, which means they are only meeting the requirement which is set by SEBI, not going beyond. If you look at nomination and remuneration committee, you need to have all independent directors. There are still companies which don't have all independent directors. These are simple examples, should have been done years back, but we are still struggling to meet the requirement. And, if I talk from a CRISIL perspective, we have tried our best to, be ahead in the game. we have tried to go beyond the requirement of the regulation. There are many things that we have done and then help shape the regulation. Sometimes as an organization, you try to lead the journey. Things like having firewalls between business development and analytical team, putting annual default rates, trying to ask for, whether the banks have seen any default. These are things before the regulations were set out for some of these things, and we have helped shape the regulation, lead the journey, and try to make it as we believe the right thing to do, rather than trying to follow what is coming up from a regulatory lens. Still the question remains, is everything black or white, right? Or is there a judgment which is required? I wish everything was black and white and we could simply take a call, but I think we have to apply our minds on various aspects, complex structures, complex documents, legal opinions, audit opinions. So I think these are some of the challenges that you face as an institution, which you have to deal with. And the question that we keep asking ourselves is, can we get it right every time, 100% of the time? Or do you have the leeway to maybe, sometimes do things in the right spirit, but you might still have a view which is different from what maybe others are looking at. There are things like practices. I mean, you look at the tier 1 issue which happened, tier 1 bond issue which happened a few years back. Practice was different, document was different, regulatory expectation was very different. Now, what do you do in that case? So I think there are many examples like that where it is not black or white. It is challenging, and I think one needs to appreciate and recognize institutions try to apply their diligence, do it consistently, and want to stay ahead in the game, how they are being transparent, how they are setting the disclosures. I think the last thing I would say is shaping regulations, and I spoke about shaping regulations. Another example is ESG. ESG is just evolving, right? Things are just coming up. Globally as well, standards are being set. There is no clarity. Taxonomy is being set. There are different standards which are coming up, and India wants to lead that journey on ESG. So how do you try and help the ecosystem, whether it's corporates or regulators or policymakers or ICAI, to help build standards and governance which will help us evolve over a period of time, right? As we try and lead that journey on ESG. Tomorrow it could be Gen AI, tomorrow it could be AI ML. So there are many aspects which are changing, and I think good organizations and institutions are expected to build that platform to lead that journey, to go beyond and maybe help. And there will be chaos, right? Because there's no clarity in some of these things, there'll be chaos, but how do you lead that journey? So finally, I'm going to say the bar is being raised for all of us, and I think it's expected to be that way. The question is the responsibility of strengthening trust and credibility only with institutions like us, regulated entities, or is it with corporates, their senior management, their KMP, or should we hold the boards of these companies accountable, equally accountable, for driving trust and credibility, for being open, transparent, for working in partnership with different policymakers, regulators, and institutions like us to help drive a larger perspective. With that, I'm going to ask Ashish Bhai to maybe share his perspective, and then Aniket, and then we'll open up for Q&A.
In a way, thank you, Amish, and thank you, Mr. Damodaran and his team for calling us. In a way, when corporate governance comes, and after reading newspapers for so many years, all of us are old enough that we have been reading newspapers, I think corporate and governance are two orthogonal issues, not connected. At least that is the perception you get, that corporates in India are not governed well. And for me, being a professional in the field, sitting on the other side where you keep on watching, I keep on asking, what is corporate governance? How did it evolve? Why it is important for the society? If we don't answer that, we'll continue to sort of take it in a direction. And in a way, if you look at, the corporates are conceptual entities. They are legal entities, but they don't exist in physical realities. They may have buildings, but they are not the entity. Those buildings are not the entities. So when the corporates came about, probably 700-800 years back, and then they evolved in their overall scheme of things, I think 1850 was the first, or rather the act which made things happen in India also, 1850 Companies Act in UK. And that's where things started happening in some sort of setting up of companies. Now, what was the reason why corporates have been so important? In my opinion, corporates have been the reason for great good. last 500 years, the lifestyle of the poorest of poor in the world has changed so much is largely because of the corporates, because of the way they're able to collect funds from investors who have money and then deploy that collective money into other people by third persons, that is managers or management of the companies. Normal businesses in normal human societies before that were basically you do your own proprietary business and sometimes you do partnership business. There were guilds, like in Europe there were guilds. Even in Sangam literature in Tamil Nadu, if you read, there were guilds which were doing businesses, but they were more like amorphous entities which will move, come in and out and stuff like that. So these corporates have been able to do great good to the world. And other people's money or other people's wealth or ownership was being managed, and that's where you required the management or the people, the board, which represents all sorts of interest, to kind of govern the company well, so that it takes into account all the shareholders' interests. So it used to be shareholders' democracy when it came about. And then slowly, the society found, of course, corporates have been reasons for great bad also. East India Company's early example, which although did good for its shareholders, but did bad for most others, whoever they came in touch. So corporates inherently are as good or as bad as people who manage. And why corporate governance in modern world is important, especially in India, is that today, after all, whatever we considered good, bad, ugly, 1 out of every 3 rupees Indians consider as wealth. 1 out of every 3 rupees, or more actually, Indians consider as wealth now comes out of the stock exchanges, what is represented by equities. And how does this wealth get created? Is basically by creating trust. People have invested money in businesses, some people have run them well, and they end up, the owners end up sort of doing better, their wealth goes up, and then some other people start those companies and some of them also do badly. And that's where basically the trust also gets created by good managers and good promoters, as we call it. Ours is what I call a separate model from Anglo-Saxon capital markets model. Ours is what I call promoter-driven Indian style sort of corporate governance vis-a-vis the Anglo-Saxon kind of framework. But that is besides the point. The purpose of corporate governance basically is that you take money from other people, they become your owners, but they don't have say in the management unless they are promoters in Indian case or they are managers in elsewhere. And then you have to manage on behalf of everyone else, and so conflicts have to be removed and so on. And that is broadly the purpose. And then, as you rightly said, some people don't follow that or follow, sometimes even they might have followed for 30 years continuously, the base standards, and for 1 single second, it goes away. And that is what I call Narva Kunjrova movement in Mahabharata, right? Yudhishthir spoke truth before that and after that. And halfway, I mean, in one part of his life, only one statement, which was not untrue either. He was asked whether Aswastama Hatahat, that is Aswastama died. And he said, he did not say no or yes. He said Narova Kunjrova, means whether it is man or it is an elephant, I don't know. He knew. And his chariot, which was running 6 inches above the earth, came down. So that is the standards Indians want from others, not from ourselves. Right? We want from Yudhishthir, not from us. And similarly, as Indians, we want all our corporates to have excellent governance, and even an iota of allegations will bring out that chariot not 6 inches, but it will probably put 6 feet down, you know, and all agencies will start coming on you, including us. But that is our job, right? So don't blame me for coming after you. But that is why the corporate governance is so much more important in the modern world, especially India, is that is the place where trust gets manufactured. Unknown people sitting in Dibrugarh, in Jorhat, putting their hard-earned 1,000 rupees in companies which are in Salem, in Tamil Nadu, they are now never going to visit. They probably even don't know what that company is doing, but they have a complete confidence in Indian legal system, Indian parliament, Indian judiciary, Indian regulators, Indian exchanges, and also Indian entrepreneurs and management, that that money will not be wasted, and when the profit comes, a small share of her, that 1,000 rupees, will be available to her. It's such a great leap of faith, right? It's not supposed to happen in a poor country like ours. $2,500 per capita. There is no country with similar market or corporate governance framework. We are now 4th largest capital markets in the world, after US, China and Hong Kong, Japan, and we are the 4th largest market in the world. With a poor, $2,500 per capita, no market, similar type. $5,000 per capita, no market, similar type. $10,000, no market, similar type. $20,000, no market, similar type. Only one market, which is China. Whenever prices go down, government has to go and buy shares. Right? Here, you have not seen that. Why I'm telling you this is, whatever we have done as SEBI, Ministry of Finance, and also, of course, our entrepreneurs, because if they don't follow in letter and spirit broadly, we would not have reached where we were, where we have reached. So for me, as a society, we have done well, despite all odds. And that is what my take home is. Today, when I go out, discuss on, say, women's representation, Europe, America, they talk and talk. 30 years, a lot of debates and discussions I have been participating across the world about women representation should be there on boards in all the companies in the world. They still talk, we have done for 10 years or 15 years, right? So they they talk the talk, we walk the walk. That is our corporate governance. And then still they have a right to accuse us of having bad governance because we are still poor. We may not remain poor long, then we will probably accuse them. But again, that is not the issue, right? So why I'm telling you this, even in CSR law came in 2013, right? There is no other country which has similar law. So our corporates are broadly large, overall on a macro basis. They have complied with letter, spirit, and everything else we give. Literally, we come out with newer regulations pretty much every day. But they still actually comply, and that is increasing the trust of people, which has ensured that 8 crore direct investors, unique PAN numbers, are now investing in the Indian market. 5 crore households are investing in Indian markets, probably more than that. 17% of India's all population, all households are now investing directly through the stock markets. And that is, I think, a credit to all our entrepreneurs, all our management of corporates who have been able to collectively create the trust. And of course, kudos to our regulators and policymakers to make this system viable. So that's what I would say to begin with, then we can take up.
Thank you, Ashish bhai. Aniket?
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Amish bhai and Ashish bhai, and thank you, Mr. Damodaran, for having us here and very rightfully putting this topic of the punching bags of anything that goes wrong. And I think while Ashish bhai was discussing about the definition of corporate governance, and I was having a sip of water, I was asking myself, how would you define corporate governance? And I think it's like defining the taste of water. You probably will never be able to describe it to somebody, but I think it's something that you cannot live without even a single day. And therefore, I think corporate governance, in essence, is something that will be at the core of everything. And for me, it stands for nothing but ethics, and ethics in everything that you do. And then everything else, financial reporting, non-financial reporting, so your accounting or your ESG or everything else, I think it has to be measured by the single cornerstone of ethics. And similarly at the Institute, coincidentally this year, we are in our 75th year of the institution. We were created in 1949, and when we were looking at how do you define these 75 years of the Indian accountancy profession and that of chartered accountancy, there's one word which stood out, and I think which is what Ashish bhai also mentioned, and it's trust. I think it's 75 years of trust, and as a profession, you have to acknowledge that when you get into public practice, you are custodians of trust. Trust of all stakeholders, that is the board, shareholders, the regulators, the government, people at large, and now the investors which come from every part of not just India but across the world. And therefore, as custodians of trust, I think as the institute, there are multiple roles that the institute plays, and I would just like to say that in terms of strengthening the corporate governance framework as well as bringing up the accountancy profession, we've always played the role of being a standard setter. So today at the institute and in India, therefore, you have accounting standards which are largely at par with the international standards. So what can you do as an accounting profession? You can have standards which meet the best in the world. And today listed companies report on what is Ind AS, which is 99.9%, I would like to say, IFRS, and therefore complying with all major economies reporting language, reporting framework, and of course recognition, measurement, as well as disclosure which these standards require. Our audit standards today are drawn from the international audit standards, the ones which are prescribed internationally and applicable across the globe. And therefore we have best-in-class audit standards. But I think what we've also realized, which was very unique to the profession in India, was that we are not only restricted to the auditing and accounting standards or even the ethical standards which we draw from the International Ethical Standards Board. But today you do valuations, and therefore you need valuation standards which we've come up with in a detailed framework. But now what is extremely important is, and especially when we talk about the punching bag, is the art of forensics. And that has gone up in terms of the requirement of forensics, not just in insolvency, but even boards suo moto, for example, doing certain forensic activity. And therefore we felt the need to standardize forensics. And what today we have in India are forensic accounting and investigation standards, where we have a detailed framework of 20 standards of how would you do a forensic from start to end, from commencing the engagement to evidence, and then coming out at the conclusion. And I think those are steps that have been taken to enhance the opportunity in terms of boards looking into certain transactions, or even regulators when they're looking at certain aspects of fraud or other wrongdoings. You need an accountant to go into the detail and see what has happened to the money trail. And therefore we have today the forensic accounting standards that have come into play. On ESG, what you said, and I think kudos to India for taking the lead in terms of a lot of these, it may be the BRSR that we have today in India, or the sustainability standards that have been done. I can very proudly say that the institute in India, therefore, was one of the first countries in the world to set up a sustainability reporting standards board, where we today have sustainability reporting standards as well as an assurance framework on ESG. Of course, it's a multidisciplinary practice. It's not just chartered accountants who will be doing it. It involves experts from various fields. But we are working towards how can we bring them on a platform so that reporting can be standardized. I think additionally I would also mention in terms of the function of the institute would be to say that how do you ensure that the membership and the firms, because when you talk about corporate governance in the listed entities, these are audit firms which are doing most part of the assurance, and therefore are they living up to the expectation? And for that we have built from years what was a peer review board which ensures that every firm's work gets peer reviewed, and now we made it more mandatory for firms to do more peer reviews in a much more frequent manner and in a much more detailed manner. There were instances, for example, of how signatures were forged and misused, and therefore we realized that can we put a stamp of authenticity on these signatures? And today in India, we were the first country in the world to do it, and I'm delighted that now the income tax department, the GST department followed suit with what we call the UDIN, or the Unit Document Identification Number. Today, if you get a certification from a chartered accountant, it doesn't hold any value if it has its signature and stamp on it, but doesn't have a 16-digit unique document number. Because we've seen so many cases of people impersonification and claiming to be a chartered accountant, or somebody just misusing it, or somebody disowning his signature and saying this was never me. And today, therefore, using technology, we've generated 5 crore UDINs in the last 3 years, and we know every attest function that is happening, and that's a regulatory function that the institute has been able to perform. And now globally it is getting replicated in terms of the technology and also in terms of the additional layer of assurance that we can offer. What we've also done is to see that how audit quality, which is a very important aspect and a large perception issue, can be addressed. And today, therefore, we have a center for audit quality within the institute, where the attempt is that how do you build and scale up the Indian firms. There are firms which may have international best practices and they adopt those in terms of documentation, in terms of materiality, for example, which you mentioned. How do you define materiality? It cannot be left subjective, and therefore this year the Center of Audit Quality came up with a template where you put in your numbers, you put in the turnover, you put in your asset size, and you put in certain qualitative criteria, and the template will draw out a materiality number for you. That tells you that you're putting the accounting firm at a framework to test whether your work is being performed as per that or not. So we have today, like I said, the materialities template. We've also gone ahead and this year created a checklist for the standards, but more importantly, templates for audit work papers. So what is the expectation today that the profession should live up to? If you're auditing a property, plant, equipment, if you're auditing an investment, if you're auditing a cash and cash equivalent, how would your work paper look like? And what are the essential items that you should verify? We've come up with a framework for that, and we've come up with what are audit work paper templates to enable our firms to strengthen. We've also created an audit quality maturity model, which a firm can go into, answer the questions, and it will tell them at what level of maturity your firm is. And more importantly, give them a guidance on how you can go higher in terms of audit quality. So there is an audit quality maturity model that the institute is built in. So I think all in all, we have as a nation moved very fast in the past few years, and therefore it was incumbent as a profession, you live up to these changes. The expansion, the equity market, the kind of regulation that we are seeing, the kind of oversight and the kind of increased expectations that are there from all professionals. The institute thought it fit that through these changes, internationalization of standards, implementation of these audit quality maturity models, through templates, through materiality, through defining audit quality, we've tried to bring all of that up. What we are also today doing is understanding that data, AI and digital is going to make a huge difference and impact on the accounting profession. And therefore, what we created is a digital accounting assurance standard board within the institute. And I'm delighted to tell you that today, we are working on a digital assurance framework. What that would typically mean is there was a time, all of us know maybe 10, 15 years ago, that you could have, theoretically speaking, and some companies would have probably done that, one turnover reflected in the financial statement, a totally different turnover number which is going in their VAT returns, and a totally different turnover which was being submitted to the banks. In today's world, is that possible? I think the answer is probably no, because, for example, the top line of your financial statements, which is your turnover, can today easily be tallied to your GST network. Entire sales that you are doing are being reported to the authority, and therefore this is a third-party assurance that you as an auditor can take and look at what you can verify from third party. If I have a 10,000 crore turnover, my GST sales for that year, of course, barring reconciliations, cut-off year-ends, etc., can probably be 9,500 or 10,500 on the GSTL portal. But I don't think today it is possible for you to have a 10,000 crore revenue on the books and maybe just 1,000 crore on GST or VAT. I think those days are gone. And therefore, how do you use these external sources to provide digital assurance? When you're saying I have an employee or payroll cost of a few hundred crores, today I can go to the PF website and look at what are the number of employees, what is the payment that the company is doing. Going back to the turnover number, if somebody is saying that 30% of this turnover is export sales, can I then ask the firm that, look, you can also go to the DGFT or the Customs or the Commerce Ministry portal and look at these turnover from the perspective of the shipping bills and see whether this is actually an export turnover. And you get third-party confirmation of what is the export that is happening. So yes, I think a lot of capacity is being built within the profession to see how we are able to live up to this changed expectations and the changed environment that is there. I think as the profession, as the institute, we hold no brief for anybody who's involved in connivance. But yes, I think on the last question that you asked, can you get everything 100% right? I think that would be an ideal scenario. We can only put in the best frameworks to see that you get it right almost all of the time. And I think we should all aspire for a world when you can do it 100% of the time. That's all I think I would say in my opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Aniket. And maybe I'm going to pick on that, Ashish bhai, this thing about, are we expected to get it 100% right? I mean, that's the, if today you ask me as a CEO of an institution or any of us, right, can we get it right 100% of the time? And what is the expectation? Why that expectation?
In a way, we as institutions and collective individually also are people who are supposed to help people create that trust, right? We give different types of information. That is, exchanges collect information from the corporates on their quarterly results, their material events and any other changes and things like that, shareholding patterns and all. You guys have rating, the chartered accountants provide the profit, loss, balance sheets, all those details. Now, when people are putting their hard-earned money, naturally the society has expectations that all of us do our job well, in time, not delayed, because justice, delayed is justice denied except in Indian court system. But basically, at least people still have expectation from other institutions in India to do things in time. And so they, and not only in time, but also ensure that it is actually correct. When it is found later on that it is not correct, and people start thinking that everyone can do it, then literally whenever such issues happen, once, twice, thrice, as I said, we manufacture trust. And we drink out of the same pond, all of us. All of you, all the entrepreneurs, all corporates, everyone, right? And anyone poisoning by giving bad information, fake information, we are basically poisoning the pond, and all of us have to suffer, right? And that's where the society's expectation from us is that we do things 100% right and not go behind the situation that we are we have done our best, but we don't know, or we say that whatever management has represented, we have presented to you, we have hidden something, we are not responsible, then why we have been kept, right? That is where the society's expectations, in some ways, last 70 years plus, the corporate governance standards in India have improved so much, is unbelievable. 30 years back when I joined, 32 years back when I joined this industry, annual results were a rarity. There would be invariably 18 months and even extended periods all the time. Getting an annual report, even as a student, was a difficult thing for me. Because only few people will have those reports going to them. And so from there, now we have quarterly results, every information available on the fingertip. The data which is given is on XBRL, so that if you put it in a database, you can check whether they all add up or not, because sometimes the annual reports, P&L doesn't add up only. So, and so even our own softwares actually ask questions to those people, the corporates who are giving us the information, saying, this seems to be wrong, please check and come back. Which was not true when they were giving us faxes and letters and PDFs and all. And so lots and lots of things have changed. India, in my opinion today, is pretty much the best corporate governance market in the world. That is without doubt. Although people can continue to accuse us on many things, but today there is no similar markets where data is available to people free of cost on real-time basis, as and when companies provide. And quarterly results, if they don't come, then twice it doesn't happen, then promoters, shareholding gets locked and things like that. No other system, no other sort of country in the world does it the way we do it. And that's also being represented by more foreigners investing in India, but more Indians trusting, and that's why our responsibility goes up. So the way I look at it is, it was trust your board because they are wise people. From that, we came to saying trust but verify. Then we said, no, verify and trust. And then verify and don't trust, right? So we have come all this entire journey, but overall, the quality of every single institutions, their reports, everything have improved tremendously. There will be differences, there will be expectation mismatches also, and there will be people taking advantage of variety of things. As and when that is known to the society, like he mentioned about that unique identifier for a document issued by a chartered accountant, is when people were actually faking the data themselves, or even chartered accountant was faking and then saying, I have not given, and all sorts of things. Now, if you keep a repository of all documents issued in the ICA's big data cloud, then, or big data wherever they want to put it, then naturally that even CA cannot fake, nor the person can fake, and everyone, any investor wanting to look at, or any government agencies wanting to look at, will be able to figure out whether this was issued or as and when they want. And similarly, now NSE is going to come out with the newer websites, not exactly NSE website, but other websites where a company is paid GST recently or not also will be available. All the legal cases which are going on in any courts, as much as we can collect from various courts against companies, their directors who are directors in other companies, even 5 years back, because there will be conflict allegations later on and things like that. So we are also putting that data which we use into public so that all of you can also sort of take that data, like the way he will put it, I will also put it, and so that more and more data available with public, somebody will look at it and things like that. But overall, we are actually reducing the gap of the expectations versus reality using the latest technology. And there is no country, I can assure you, the way we have done UPI or the way we have done stock markets. Today, NSE is the largest exchange in the world now in terms of number of trades happening every day. Sometimes it does 45% of trades of the entire world's all exchanges put together, right? So why it has happened is because we have used as a society technology which is coming up, and we have leapfrogged. We have leapfrogged compared to other societies. And we don't have that kind of lobbying power which stops America from implementing women's representation on board or going T+1. And because the lobbying and lobbyists are very powerful. In India, they are not. Our bureaucrats are more technocrats than any one of us. So they also visualize what technology can do. They implement GST and they can also tell me what to do in my business and his business, right? So that's where we have become a very technocratic society, and the standards which we now expect from our corporates are like way above what rest of the world expects from their corporates. And in some ways, largely I would say we are meeting that. There will be some gaps, and although perception may be that our corporates are not well governed in some ways because in media what you get is a man biting the dog, right? And since India is 17% of world population, there will be at least one newspaper filling or two newspaper filling men biting dogs. But normally 10,000 times more dogs bite the man, but we don't look at that as news. And we think in India, all the men keep on biting dogs, which is not true. And that is where basically I kind of...
So I'll ask one question, and I'll ask the audience to maybe, keep your list of questions ready. I'll come to the audience. So, this thing about awareness and education, and I spoke about that, right? As an institution, we also have, there's an expectation that we will go and educate because things are becoming sometimes more complex. What standards you're following, what criteria, what guidance notes, So, I think the larger question is, can institutions hide behind disclosures and disclaimers? Because if you see a report, Aniket bhai, I mean, all of us have and there are many smart people who write very well. You can hide behind, you will not know what exactly is written. The point is made and still it is not known to people. So how do you deal with that?
So I would say that disclosures, disclaimers are going to be part of any kind of assurance that you provide. But I think it should not be used as a veil to hide behind the work that you are expected to do and the kind of quality of performance of service that is expected out of you. For example, look, today, as if you are sitting and doing an audit report for an enterprise, it is not just going to be the financial numbers that will decide your disclosures, for example, on an audit report or even the financial statements. You have so many other non-financial issues, for example, a court case, a litigation. Now you will typically go out to the legal experts, get legal opinion, and you know it as much as others that you can always get very two strong views of the same facts.
Different opinions, yeah.
Then you'll get two different opinions on the same item, and then how much of your expertise and judgment you can do. And therefore, sometimes you will find that you would have said in your report, saying based on the report from this leading law firm, this is what the management's perception is, and you make your individual assessment out of it and saying, is that a reasonable inference to draw from the situation? Look at maybe past precedents, look at what the legal opinion says in terms of why they are forming and arriving at that view, and then form your opinion. But definitely I think it should not be used as a veil just to say that we put out a disclaimer or a disclaimer of opinion and just say that, well, I couldn't do this. I think those days are behind us. Today you have very detailed reporting requirement in India. It is not just an audit report that you give out. If you're doing a report of a listed entity, for example, there is going to be a report on Caro, which is very descriptive and detailed. And like Ashish Bhai mentioned, I think nowhere else in the world you have such a detailed reporting framework. Yes, the challenge is that in so much information, will you miss out on what is important? And I think there it's going to be the role of everybody coming into play, because I have seen for one, where auditors have not just reported in Caro or any of their disclosures, but in fact even given a qualified opinion. And yet the question that asks is, and I think people say there is the power of the pen, but there must also be the power of visualization and somebody reading what is written by the pen. And therefore, when you write an opinion or you qualify your audit report, what are we doing overall on a qualified opinion? I mean, there have been instances when people would have qualified saying this is an intangible which is created. Look, I don't know whether this is an intangible. That's all I can do. The understanding, I think, in the common parlance has to also be that the financial statements is the responsibility of the management. It is the management which will drop the financial statements. They make those financials and then tell you to give an opinion on it. My role begins as a chartered accountant and as an auditor on the basis of the financial statements to see whether that is true and fair in terms of the opinion that I can give. And when I'm doing that, I think in that process, there will be, of course, like I said, different opinions, different aspects, but also the understanding that the management has to take certain calls. And therefore, your role will be restricted. Second, we all have to be appreciative of the fact. Today you have limited reviews which go out in 45 days. An audit report typically which will go out in the 60 days from the end of the financial year. And therefore, I'm not looking at the entire population of data. Having said that, yes, today with technology, with artificial intelligence and so much information being available in digital, I can at least have somebody else or maybe a system look at it, which I typically cannot look at. So I think all in all, I would just say that it is not a disclaimer which is going to suffice, but there will be situations where you will have certain issues which you will have to disclaim because you do not know everything. You do not have the time to look at everything. And more importantly, even if you've written something, for example, if I've qualified an intangible and yet you have somebody going and financing that intangible, I think then to expect and to hang the auditor's head just to say because, well, why did this happen? I think, so there has to be a shared responsibility. That's what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Aniket. I'm going to open it up for the audience. Okay, let me come to the gentleman here, the first gentleman. Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Surya Narayanan. And I have a basic question on governance. What I have understood this last 2 days and even earlier is governance should be a culture. And but what I have seen happening in India is instead of governance being practiced and then getting codified as regulations, here there is a blowout somewhere, then regulations come and governance follow. So do you agree with this statement?
In a way, your observation may be correct because of the reason that whether we should go for the rules-based framework or principles-based framework. Because governance in a English sense or even Hindi sense or Sanskrit sense is broadly well understood in everyone's mind. At the same time, everyone will have a lot of non-overlapping concept of governance. And governance when it comes to you is different, vis-a-vis governance you expect from others is different. So we have what we call self-dharma versus collective dharma and things like that. So we are all very good at rationalizing and all, but overall the principle-based regulations or principles-based governance or any other framework in India has not worked. Because the person who gets punished goes to the court and court says, where is the regulation exactly written? And when you write exact, again there are smart lawyers who find out ways to also kind of create doubt on that. Then we have to also plug that loop and then that loop and that loop. That's where all these things happen. But overall, why this is done is what you need to understand. Because the expectations of the public on the regulatory authorities or on the parliament or anyone else is much more in India than rest of the world. There is no laissez-faire in India. When people make money out of listed companies, it is their brilliance. When they lose money, they want somebody's head. So that's why both of them are saying, ki humko mat pakdo. Management ko bhi pakdo. Similarly, they will want government, why didn't you? I may be not looking at it normally, While as in US, there is a laissez-faire market, which is, all this is fine, but ultimately buyers beware, right? Whoever invests has to look at all this and then also apply their brain. But in India, the public expectations, the media wants to shame regulators. It is nice to shame them, right? What will they react with? Some more regulation. So unless you understand that ours is what I call a market where everyone should make money, and when somebody loses or markets go down, somebody's head should roll, and also new regulation should come. So that is what is happening, because we are expecting it. We are actually enforcing it. All of us put together with our rationalization, all of us are brilliant, right? I mean, Indians are brilliant by nature, right? And we think, and then we come out. And similarly, regulators are also Indians. They also, not only they think, but they also put the best thinkers in committees. And best practices across the world is collected. So earlier I used to say, that a large corporate would employ BCG or McKinsey or Bain and get you the practice. Today, the regulator will give you on platter, best practice in the world. No money to be spent. Only thing is you have to follow that.
Yes. This has been a very substantive session, and my name is K. Jairaj. I want to ask Mr. Talati, and if other speakers can also join, on, the audit committee in all companies is really regarded as the cornerstone of the governance and financial probity process. So in the wake of that, what is your take on this, and are there any best practices that you can tell by which the audit committee can have a stronger role?
So I think today, if you look at, as we speak, the role of the audit committee is being spoken about, talked about, and you're reading it even in the media, the expectations there. I know they will meet once in a quarter before the results, or maybe 5 times in a year, and therefore I cannot say that they are the management. But at the same time, I think the role of the audit committee is to have that third eye in terms of not just the management looking over the oversight, but having somebody else come and look at, for example, what is the internal audit report saying? What is the coverage that the internal audit is doing in terms of the number of transactions that are covered? Are you doing a real analysis of risk assessment? Today, somewhere, risk assessment is left to the auditor's judgment and saying it's a part of your audit standards, and therefore you have assessed the risk. I would say, why should not risk become a process where the audit committee also says, look, this is an organization, this is the nature of transactions, this is what are the similar instances which have happened in the past in a similar industry, and therefore can you look at, for example, a revenue recognition and tell me that whether revenue recognition is happening as per the industry practice, or are there challenges that the company might book revenue and that receivable will sit in my balance sheet and I will never be able to realize that? Am I just continuing the revenue realization and therefore the receivable forward on a continual basis, or is there some end point to this game? Now these are questions when the audit committee asks, I think it ups the game for everybody, for the management and for the CFO, in terms of making sure that you have processes, you have internal controls defined, you have a matrix which you can then judge it by, you have an internal audit system which becomes much more robust and knows that I'm going to be answerable to the audit committee. And of course, for the statutory auditor, there is so much wealth of information available for him to appropriately arrive at his opinion and state that whether this thing is done or not. So I think what I would just say in terms of the best practice that you ask for in audit committees would be more engagement, looking at accounting policies, principles in terms of whether they are meeting the industry best practice. I'm not asking them to be auditors or expert accountants, but being on that seat, I think looking at what is the industry doing and whether it is being aligned with the best practices globally. Also, just as an ending point, maybe if you feel as an audit committee that this is an area of risk, I think why not have a suo motu forensic done, not just for the purpose of having forensic always as a fraud or a fact-finding exercise post facto. It can be a robust exercise that you may do on certain accounts, certain areas of the financial statements on a suo motu basis. I think that itself, it's like a speed breaker, because you know there's going to be a speed breaker coming in front of you 300 meters ahead. You will slow down the car before hitting the speed breaker. I think that's probably my 2 cents on that. Thank you.
For me, more philosophical, because they are what I call detailed people. I sort of sit in a place where I keep on watching their reports, and then try to think, what is it that we are trying to figure out in corporate governance as board level, audit committee level, even people like me whose job is to keep on finding other people, right? So one is the asymmetry of information. Inherently, the management has more information than the board. And naturally, the board has little more information than the outsiders. So asymmetry of information, corporate governance has to try to reduce that asymmetry to zero. Now, zero is not possible. So it has to be tending to zero. If you are a mathematician or engineer, you will know a limit problem. That it will tend to zero, even if you work very hard, never become zero. But try to go towards removal of asymmetry of information wherever possible. Then asymmetry of power. That management has more power to take decisions on behalf of the company, and even some of the promoters or the shareholders who have sort of board seats and also executive responsibility, they have more power. So how do you try to figure out whether that power is utilized in a more judicious way and a more fair way, right? And third part is what I call conflict management. Is there conflict of interest? Is there agency conflict? Because they are supposed to be the agents of whom? Shareholders. But usually in Indian history, we say, we give tremendous examples of people who overcame their agency conflict and became the demigods. But they became demigods only because they were exceptional people. Normal human is supposed to actually indulge in agency conflict and continue. And your job as a board is to try to figure out all those conflicts that happen of all sorts of things, right? And say that this is not possible, that is not possible. Of course, the government has helped or regulators have helped by telling you not allow related party transactions, majority of minority. All this is basically a tool, which again, in a way, India only does. Many of these tools are, even to the smaller shareholders, are not available in rest of the world. But we do that because slowly we have kind of been on the thinking role. We are the leaders in thinking about how to do corporate governance in the world, right? But if you handle these three broadly, in my mind, you have done well on a philosophical basis.
So I'm going to add a different perspective. You spoke about role of audit committee. How do you differentiate that from the role of management? What is the expectation you would have? A level of skepticism. So I mean, just taking related party as an example, most companies who would have related party, you would have disclosure in number of lines, right? It's very difficult. Small font sometimes, number of information, right? How are you going to really figure out what is the question to be asked? What is the unusual transaction? Is there a new transaction? What is the benchmark? I mean, there are things which you would want to understand so that you are making sure that you are on top of what is being put out in front of you, right? You are not being managed. I mean, I'm saying that in the right spirit. I think, the other thing I would say is that, I'll give you an example of a regulation which has come, right, for rating companies. Rating companies have been asked to go and meet audit committee of companies whom they rate once in a year, to basically try and, share a perspective, ask if there's anything which they know which might not have been informed to the rating company. And at least in our experience, since the time the regulation has come, we have not heard from any audit committee telling us about any issue. And then we find sometimes that some of the members of the audit committee have left the audit committee highlighting issues of governance. So what is the role I would expect from an audit committee? I mean, if we have met you and you have told us there is no issue, and then suddenly after a quarter or two, you put out in public domain that there were a lot of issues and hence we are, stepping out. I mean, there is a larger onus, right? You are not the company. You have a role to play. So I think there's an expectation that, all of us would have from each of us. And I think that is something to be kept in perspective when we are looking at our responsibility on some of these committees.
Mr. Damodaran has a point.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That was a lovely session and lots of takeaways. I have a question which is somewhat discordant. Let me raise that. Some 20 years ago, I made a statement which wasn't received very well at that time, which is that we live life in the shrinking space between disclaimers and disclosures, and that space is shrinking and we're living there. Now I think everyone has recognized the importance of disclosures and disclaimers, both of that. Now my question is this: as I look into the future, and with audit committees being given more and more responsibilities, will there come a time when audit committees will resort to disclaimers? Will audit committees say that, okay, we are doing all of this, but we got to protect ourselves, so we will craft some disclaimers? The reason I'm asking this is, increasingly it is being felt, and some have articulated this, that audit committees and independent directors exist to protect the promoter from the promoter. It is really protecting the promoter from the promoter, his greed, his short-sightedness, whatever. It's the audit committee which protects him from coming to grief, so that he doesn't pay the price going forward. So with audit committees becoming larger than life in a sense, in fact making boards seem irrelevant in regard to certain matters. The other related point that I wanted to ask is, you use the word skepticism. Of course, Aniket has been hinting at the being a much younger man. I used to know his father when his father was the president of ICAI. This is the second generation president that I'm interacting with. He didn't quite say skepticism, but he was pointing us in that direction. Will audit committees also have to develop a sense of skepticism? And if that happens, isn't there a contradiction in roles? This is a subset of people drawn from the board. So you are being skeptical in regard to decisions that are taken in the board. Where do we get there with all these kinds of expectations? I'm talking about the expectations that, the corporate universe and the entire ecosystem has from all of you. But I'm stretching it to the expectations from the audit committee. I sat at one point of time on 6 audit committees, which was something like working 18 hours a day if you actually read the papers, right? And I can tell you that it's much more fun being on the board than being on the audit committee. It's much more fun.
So I can maybe give a perspective and happy for you to share. So my sense is sometimes I think the regulators or the policy makers are pushing the accountability to boards and audit committee, which should be the accountability of the management, right? I think ultimately management is running, and you have KMPs, you have executive directors. So there is an expectation of the company doing what is right. They are supposed to do whatever has to be done, and the board and the audit committee has a role of governance. But you ask, a lot of times today we see that board is asked to confirm, audit committee is asked to confirm, and the amount of time, and there is no way. It's all dependent on certificates and various aspects as assurance, because there's no time, like you rightly said, sir. So I think there is a dilemma which one needs to think about, and how managements will help audit committee in meeting that dilemma, right? How do you make it easy for you to have that dialogue, that look at that information to help you make that right decision, right? Even if it means asking the tough question. And I think the other thing which you spoke about disclosure and disclaimer, and I know we've had multiple chats on that. I think that is something which it bothers all of us, right? Because we are dependent on, let's say, an auditor certificate, or we are dependent on a chartered accountant certificate, a lawyer certificate. How do you read what is being written? And there are limitations on scope. I mean, a lot of times we don't even read the limitations of the scope. And I know, we have had dialogue at the audit committee saying, listen, why was this not highlighted? Because we thought it's absolute. So I think, you need to, and that's where the skepticism point comes in. That I'm not saying skepticism from the board decision. I'm saying skepticism of what is being presented to you. You need to have that, and that is the healthy dialogue between a company and the audit committee and the board. And I would say, as management, I would respect that. And I would want to be pushed in that direction, knowing it is not an easy journey. But believe me, that's how you make a company stronger. If you go with everything being agreed, I'm not sure that's the right dialogue to have.
Which is something that I subscribe to. Right? But have we moved to distrust and crucify?
No, that's why I said,
Yeah.
saying We were in trust only, then we went for trust and verify.
Now,
Trust
are we
but
in
verify. Then we
distrust and
went to
crucify?
verify and trust, and then we went to verify and don't trust.
I think we'll take the last question because the time
Last
question from you. Yeah.
So, you know, the elephant in the room really is related party transactions, right? By and large. So why doesn't the institute push for abolition of RPT? No, I'm serious.
So I think, look, it's...
Sir?
I think... I would just say this. Look at the international classification first and foremost. I think it's something which is global. It's not something unique to India. And it's a disclosure. Related party transactions is what? You are identifying the relationship and also putting across the nature of transaction and the amount which is involved. That is typically what an auditor would verify and go through. Today with what Ashish Bhai, for example, mentioned, they're putting it on the NSE portal. I was delighted to hear you can look at. Today it's much more easier for you to identify related parties than you could common directorship, common ownership, etc. than was earlier. You were always at some point relying on the management identifying those related parties for you, but now there is an opportunity for you to verify whether some of these parties actually are related or not. So I would say that just totally doing away with related parties, I think that's not something which is there internationally or what I would subscribe to. Just on Damodaranji's point of skepticism in the audit committee, I think audit by itself, the word imbibes some amount of skepticism, though I would hate for a day that audit committees start giving disclaimers in terms of what they have seen. I think end of the day, sir, it's about, Ashish Bhai very nicely gave the example of the dog biting the man and the man biting the dog. I think it's about the road accident. You can at best be speed breakers or traffic light. But I think the blame has to always be on the driver who's driving this seat and car. And therefore, I think it's, end of the day, the management which drives it. And therefore, I think we can only have better quality speed breakers or better quality time traffic lights, especially in a city like Mumbai, speaking. But yes, end of the day, I think it's the driver who's going to drive. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I think thank you.
We'd like to thank our esteemed panelists for providing very, very insightful insights. We'd like to invite Mr. Damodaran to join us on stage to do us the honors. Presenting a memento to each panelist, it is a caricature and a certificate for planting 10 trees in the Sundarbans in their names. Thanking Mr. Amish Mehta for moderating, Mr. Ashish Kumar Chauhan and Mr. Aniket Talati. Thanking our esteemed panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Damodaran. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we move forward to our final session today. We're going to move forward without a break due to a paucity of time and to stay on track. We're going to now set up the stage for our final session. served as chairman of Unilever Arabia, managing director of Brook Bond Lipton, and vice chairman of Hindustan Lever. Besides holding senior positions in several Tata companies, he presently mentors startups and corporate managers through his talks and writing. Among the various courses that he has taught, one merits mention: LWNT, Learning What Nobody Teaches. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan.
Thank you. Thank you.
In conversation with Mr. Damodaran. Gentlemen.
Are more people coming in from the outside? We shouldn't deny anyone the benefit of Gopal's wisdom on this subject. He's just brought out a book, as some of you might be aware, addressing nearly the same question, or maybe answering the question that we have posed: do boards lead? And if they are actually to lead, what is that input that the law does not provide for that they need to bring? So let me set the context for you. There are institutions in India that provide training for directors, including one that has been set up by the government of India. And they conduct a lot of training programs for directors. They get you to pass an exam. Then after that, they keep you on some kind of a list and then expect companies to go to that list and find directors. Very few companies look at that list because the companies know that that's not what they're looking for. And why do I say this? Because what these persons are taught are which form to fill in what contingency, which rule to look at, and directors don't need to get all of that into their heads. If they did that, the company secretaries would be unemployed. You wouldn't need company secretaries in the boards. But what directors need to understand is when you step into a boardroom, one, you must have role clarity. And second, if you're clear about what your role is as a member of the board, what is it that you bring to the boardroom that helps you to discharge that responsibility to play out that role? And that's the question that I want to pose to Gopal as we set out on this journey, which is, yes, some kind of domain knowledge, familiarity is useful, maybe not domain expertise in every case. You need to be worldly wise because the board is a seat of wisdom, management is a seat of knowledge. You need to have some experience. Many people who've been there, done that, get into boardrooms. But then there is this additional element that you talk about in your book. And I want you to spend a little time explaining why that is the element that sets the winners apart from the losers.
Well, thank you very much for having me here and inquiring into the very subject that I was obsessed with. I don't mind admitting.
It's a shared obsession.
It's a shared obsession.
Yes.
I think for all of us, none of us wants companies that keep failing. So since I said I've spent 37 years on boards, over 25 companies in India, Sri Lanka, Arabia, England, what is it that I can stand back, because I'm at a stage of life when I can stand back and think about it without, and accept my own mistakes, which I have made. And I came to a profound conclusion. And this Brahma Mantra I'm going to share with you now. And you can go and tell everybody that I said it, because it's not a secret. And the Brahma Mantra is that we are always looking at the same face of corporate governance. We define it, we make laws pertaining to accountancy, Companies Act, and so on, SEBI, stock exchanges, but we never see the other side. It is like that Satyam Shivam Sundaram. You are always seeing Zenith, Shashi Kapoor is always seeing Zenith Aman's pretty face. Until suddenly he saw the other side, and of course the whole movie unraveled. And it's the other side that I've seen. And the side of corporate governance that we see regularly, which is epitomized by the discussion you just had, and probably had in the previous days as well, is the aspect of accountancy, ratings, and so on, which are the teachable things in corporate governance. And so institutes who are training you are also teaching you all that. But the unteachable things, which is behavior, which happens in a boardroom, is not much commented upon. It is there. I can't say we are the first people to do it. And therefore we have written a whole book, and we decided in advance we will retain only 200 pages, because the person must be able to buy it at an airport. We do want people to buy it, obviously, but read it on the flight to Calcutta and say this is an easy read. The hope that something will remain for them to think over in board. So we have looked at the behavioral part of directors, and no law can change behavior. Laws can encourage a certain type of behavior, but behaviors don't change laws. It's the other way around. Laws are made to change behavior by putting restrictions. So we wrote that book, and if I might just conclude with a little anecdote to dramatize this, and I admit I'm dramatizing it. Between you and the chimpanzee, you meaning all of us human beings, and the chimpanzee, 99.2% of the genomes are the same. It's the 0.8% we have looked at. The laws are looking at the 99.2. So that's the essence of our book. We called it Inside the Boardroom, How Behavior Trumps Rationality. Because our image of a board director, and there are many aspiring directors who think they've had a distinguished career, and indeed they would have had as an executive in a private sector, public sector, government, ambassadors. And somehow this looks like a nice thing to be associated with and want to become board directors. And there's nothing wrong with that, except that the mental preparation that is required to be a director, I have realized after 37 years, needs to be spruced up. And it's for that reason that I think this is a very core conference for me. Because the high priests of corporate governance, some of them at least, are sitting in this or participating in this. And if I go to a general audience, there'll be people who say this is a very boring subject, corporate governance. So I don't use the word corporate governance. I say inside the boardroom, to say inside the committee of your building society, inside the managing committee of the club you are a member of. If you're in a temple subcommittee or a music sabha, go to Shanmugananda Sabha or any other sabha, you'll find similar issues of behaviorism. And that is what has caught my attention.
I want to take you to two specifics. You mentioned Satyam in your book, and for good reasons. You cannot have a book about behavior in boardrooms without talking about Satyam. It would be incomplete, to say the least. And then we have Enron. Boards which had phenomenal directors in terms of what they were in a previous life, what they were doing outside of the boardroom. And then in both these boardrooms, something went wrong, right? So, is it because they were not suited to this in terms of temperament? That filter was not applied when they were brought to the boardroom. Is it that they decided thus far and no further? At the end of the day, the promoter has set up the company. If Raju wants to do something, who are we to stand in the way? We will raise all our objections, but when it comes to taking a shot at the goal, we will not do it. We would not offend him because he invited us. Enron, some of the best names that you had at that point of time, including, and both boards had a commonality. Both had people who taught finance. Both had people who were in the area of governance. One was teaching governance in a US university, and yet collectively they clearly failed. I don't want to pull my punches. What was that behavioral aspect that stood in the way of their actually telling the promoters and the management, look, we want no part of this?
I can only speculate, and because I wasn't on the Enron board either, neither on the Satyam board. I reflected on this through my own experiences, and I must say I referred to other people's writings and books, so I don't claim originality. And in the book that we have written, we have provided a questionnaire of 15 questions, which you can answer yes, no.
Yeah, but you did the reverse counting. The 4, 3, 2, 1 is a reverse count you did.
Okay. But if you tick the boxes there, you can get a score of 10 to 15, and I've taken 3 buckets to make it easy. You can get a score of 4 to 10, or you can get a score of less than 4. If you're getting a score of less than 4, it shows that there are a few aberrations of behavior in your board, but it's okay. No human being is perfect. If you get a score of 4 to 10, you say there are some red signals in your board. You need to be alert and think about the things that are bothering you as per your answers to them. But if you get a score of more than 10, then you better rethink whether you want to be on that board. And I'm not going into the questions themselves because that's not what you asked me to do. Neither am I carrying the book with me. But it's a bit like the Reader's Digest. It pays to increase your word power. If you get a score of 12 or 13, I can guarantee you, please go home, buy the book, and apply this 15-point questionnaire to what's happening in the country. Apply the 15-point questionnaire to what's happening in some major company which keeps coming in the news periodically. Okay? I guarantee you, if you get a score of less than 10, you're a biased party. It has things such as, because you answer, if the CEO looks like the god of the company and he is there everywhere, watch it. In itself, that's a sufficient condition but not a necessary condition. And you can go on through the other level. If his story sounds very charming when you're listening to him, but when you think about it, somehow there's a feeling of doubt, watch it. If the valuation of the company or the profits are increasing beyond normal human comprehension, watch it. We are not saying these are impossible, by the way. But with due respect to my friends, Ashish and so on before, Amit, if you find that your regulations are pretty good and the best in the world, thank you very much. But if foreign funds are coming and pumping up a share price to astronomical levels, and you have not even made the attempt to understand it, and the regulator has all the powers in the world, all the laws in the world, but he has admitted he can't get to the bottom of it. Come on. There is something, and that lies in behavior. That's my hypothesis. Our hypothesis, I have a co-author who is an academic at the SP Jain Institute. So I think in the case of Enron, I don't know, perhaps less so because I don't know the individuals involved. I mean, Enron was toast of the town. When things are going well, you're on the front cover page, you're obsessed with yourself. And the Enron case in particular, the attitude, you don't understand, these are the new business models, guys. You dumbos, you're sitting on Wall Street. We know better. So I think there are always signals that are coming, which is one of the reasons why I'm totally against this concept of a promoter. It's a dud idea, which only India has. Nobody in the world has that concept of a promoter. But we can't get rid of it either.
Yeah, and they remain promoters even they have less than 5% shareholding.
Absolutely.
And some of them are wanting to be reclassified, and
the
rules are getting in the way, so they remain promoters. But again, if you look at the 2008 financial crisis, you look at Bear Stearns, you look at what happened in Merrill, there was a change. If you look at some of those, Lehman Brothers, and all of it is down to behavior in the boardroom and governance.
Correct.
The questions that ought to have been asked were not asked. If they were asked, they were not answered. There were no follow-up questions. And I must tell you this about the Enron board, that much after Enron blew up, I met one of the directors on the Enron board at the JFK airport. It was a casual meeting. And I thought this was too good an opportunity to pass up, so I asked him, so how come you didn't know this was going wrong? I mean, you were celebrated for your understanding of the corporate world. He said, we weren't told. So being a somewhat pesky type of guy, if I wasn't what I am, I would have been, Lata, I would have been a reporter maybe. I would have asked all the difficult questions, I don't know. So I said, but did you ask? You weren't told, but did you ask? But then God intervened. Somebody came and took him away and said, your flight has been announced. I'm still waiting for the answer to that question. The point is, Did some of these people ask? Satyam is much worse. They asked the questions, they expressed all the reservations. In fact, one of the directors said, have you guys decided this and are we going to rubber stamp the proposal as a board? And then you come to the last part of the proceedings where it says after detailed discussions it was unanimously approved. And you wonder what happened between those paragraphs, because there is some discontinuity between what has been said till then. So are members of the board saying at one stage, okay, we will ask questions, we will raise doubts, we will express our difficulty in understanding the merit of the proposal, but when push comes to shove, we will hold back and say at the end of the day we are, visiting artists on a quarterly basis, and what right do we have to derail some proposal that the promoter seems to have invested his emotions in addition to his money. How does that change? Can boardrooms change that? Can people get together collectively and say, sorry, we will ask the politically inconvenient questions in the boardroom? Do you see that happening?
I would be dishonest if I said I can see it happening as though I'm some...
No, in the future,
as you look into the future. I think just like behavioral economics did not become fashionable, and nobody bothered about it until Amor Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, and then they got the Nobel Prize and so on. Behavioral corporate governance has not got a currency. And I'm hoping in a small contribution, I've just put a little building block, behavioral corporate governance will start to occupy the minds of leaders who are influencing the course of corporate governance, because that's what's missing. That's the 0.8% of the DNA, because everybody's focused on the 99.2%, which is the same as a chimpanzee, so you get chimpanzee-like results. And in all the cases that you mentioned, long before your context arises for you to ask a question or for you to be told, those are what I call cognizant knowledge. You can ask and you can get a reply. But there are behavioral knowledges that come well before. And let me use a metaphor. Looking at the profile of people here, I think you will relate with the metaphor looking at the age group of the profile I can see. You have a teenage son or daughter. He is 12, 13, you know it's an age of change. If the behavior of the child changes, they don't get up in the morning, their marks are slipping, they look a bit phased out, they're using words which you never heard them use before. As a parent, would you wait to be told? Or would you wait to be asked? You would intuitively, the father, mother, or both of them together, try to find out more about it. Because behavior is what leads to inquiry, not knowledge. We've got this funny idea that lots of knowledge leads to inquiry, but behavior is what leads to inquiry. And therefore, that inquiry will lead you to ask or to be told. Of course, if you're told a blatant lie, even then you may say, my child is behaving odd. At an extreme case, you may put a detective, but hopefully you don't get that far for most of us. And I think in the board, and I can mention experiences I've had without mentioning the companies for obvious reasons, where we've done that. I'm not very proud of the fact that I've been privy and party to the firing of 7 CEOs. That's not exactly a track record I put on my biodata, but has to be done. And I would like to believe whoever might have initiated that or whoever might have taken it forward, I was very thankful that I could have come close to getting fired and I didn't get fired, so that's fine. And I was very happy to see that it was the behavior that led to inquiry, and the inquiry led to facts, and so we must look to the backstory. And I think that's what we miss when we get obsessed with the laws. Laws are important, don't get me wrong. Regulator, law, all that is important. You must have policemen to follow what's happening for the traffic rules. You must have traffic rules, but you must look at behavior of drivers also.
Yes, and do some defensive driving also.
Exactly,
in the process.
exactly.
Yes. Okay. There's a related question which is this larger than life chairman, promoter, CEO, MD, call him or her whatever you will, influencing the conversations in the boardroom. When I say influencing the conversations, I'm being charitable. Often there's no conversation. because this person is so domineering that it's a monologue more than a conversation in the boardroom. And anyone that wants to get in a word edgewise, it's like one of our favorite television anchors. Many people don't go to his shows. They say, we've been well brought up. We are told not to interrupt, and therefore we will never get to express our point of view. So we'll have to keep quiet. So some people go there, sit down, and then come back, not having disrupted the so-called conversation in the boardroom. Is that part of the problem where behavior is absent? The right behavior.
The part of the problem that you are not interrupting or objecting to that behavior. I've been on a board where there's one obstreperous, in my opinion, obstreperous character. He happened to be a very good, at that time at least, a very good friend of the boss man. And so nobody wanted to take up. But there was an occasion, and I don't think I was risking my life or my limb, but I said, hang on, let me finish. And when we came out, people said, "Hey, you told that guy that." I said, listen, I am on this board for my judgment, not for my knowledge. People make this mistake of, why are they on a board? You're hired on a board for judgment. Please don't think that knowledge is worth zero. But it is the cherry on the cake is judgment. The cake itself is wheat flour and sugar and all that stuff. And if you cannot exercise that judgment, then what are you doing on the board? And there are, I do believe part of the behavioral training that directors need is how to disagree without becoming disagreeable. It requires training. It's not easy. Because you've grown up in a society where Papa, you don't challenge Papa, you don't challenge grandfather, you don't challenge the school teacher. Now let's not moan about it. That's the reality, that's the culture, and that's fine. So I do believe that when you are helping people to become a director, if you give them this training, they will be able to say, please, may I just finish? And there are very nice ways. I've seen lovely human beings say it in a lovely way. The other guy's got the message, you'll see him pipe down a bit. And he may hold a grudge against you, that's a risk you take. But it's considered a very welcome intervention. So I do believe that behavioral training is what is missing. That's that 0.8%, which these gentlemen who came before us, 99.2 have got it right. Thank you very much. But I want somebody to look at 0.8.
No, is it
and
also,
mine is a small attempt.
Is it also something to do with the fact that maybe some people call it Indian culture, I don't know, I don't understand that. Some people think that if you express a contrary view in the boardroom, it is likely to impact your relationship with the manager, the promoter, the chairman, whoever, and that damage that is done to the relationship, perceived damage, goes outside the boardroom and continues. And therefore, I don't want to be on the bad books of somebody. Therefore, questions that arise in my mind, I will hold them back. Maybe in private conversation I will ask, but I will not ask in the boardroom. So is that part of the problem what we call the Indian culture problem, for want of a better word? The other point which I want you to talk about is, the mutual fund industry has a very good warning. Past performance is no guarantee of future returns. Right? Now, if I have been a great football player, a great army officer, a great something, and then you bring me into the boardroom and it becomes, as the Englishmen used to call it, flower vase directors, they bring color into the boardroom, but nothing much more than color. So is that part of the problem that I want, especially when I'm just doing an IPO, I want good names. Whether they are able to commit quality time to my board, do they understand anything about what this company is about? The answer is a clear no. And yet, I want them on the board. So clearly, their behavior might be very polite. They may make the right noises, but they won't ask the right questions. They won't be told lies. There was a gentleman called Babu Rao Patel many years ago who brought out a magazine. I forget what his name was. The Mother India, isn't it? Right, yeah. And he had a column with a very interesting heading. I didn't much care for what he said. Ask me no questions and I will tell you no lies. So is that what is happening in the boardroom?
I suppose to some extent. But it is happening because you are not wanting to influence the dynamics of the board. And late in my life and career, probably too late, but then we all become wise as we get older, I have started putting two criteria for recruiting an independent director where I have an influence or say in that. First, don't tell me he's a wonderful chartered accountant or lawyer or former regulator or ambassador to this country. That's all fine.
Former regulators also discount. Okay.
I don't discount them. I just say that those are their technical skills. Thank you very much. Show me where he or she has exercised judgment.
Okay.
Usually that question knocks off the person who's saying something because you don't know.
Very good filter. Not many go through that.
Now, I'm not saying that those who don't get an answer are bad director candidates. Don't get me wrong. But it forces you to think about something. It's like you're telling your young son, your progress in life will depend on how you overcome obstacles rather than how you seize opportunities. And then the boy goes away saying, what dad said sounded profound. What the hell does he mean, you know? And it's the same thing. You ask him, show me an example where he or she has exercised judgment. So that is one criterion that I put. The second that I add is, we are already 9 of us around the table. The effectiveness of this board is more important to me than the efficiency of this board. And I make that distinction.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Because to most people, they are about the same thing. They are not. The laws of physics will tell you that efficiency is the shortest distance between 2 points. Effectiveness is the ability to get around and get the job done. And effective things are usually inefficient. So, with these 9 people around the table, am I getting an output which is more than 9? Because 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 9 is no great algorithm. And with that addition, will this 9 become 11? So, in these two questions, I have found a lot of good discussion takes place. A lot of masala comes out. Masala not in a gossipy sense. A lot of I don't know that sort of thing. And I think it will help.
The other question I have for you, and this is based on observation.
I don't want it in the SEBI rules, that this is what we should be doing, because then it will become a routine thing.
No, if SEBI writes it in the rules, it's easier to escape doing it. No, what I wanted to ask you was this, that you get two kinds of people I'm oversimplifying, in boardrooms. Those who have something to say and those who have to say something. And is that latter element, those who have to say something, part of the behavioral dynamics of the board, is adversely impacting the conversation in the boardroom?
It does.
On every subject.
Yeah, they must
I have a point of view. It might be completely useless, completely tangential, it may expose my ignorance, but I have the courage to be seen as ignorant, therefore I'll keep holding forth on that.
Absolutely right. In fact, one of the behavioral training, I've listed down 11 or 12, but one can expand it based on other people's views. One of them is, on which point should I object mildly and which should I object strongly?
Okay.
You know, every point doesn't have to be resulting in a thumping of the table and walking out, you know. So, there are some points. For example, the management comes and says, I want to put a factory to make this bottle. It can be either in Nanded or Sangli. And here's our matrix which shows that Sangli is a little better than Nanded. I can say, listen, I also put up a factory in Sangli 100 years ago when I used to be in service. There are some issues there. Just look into that matter, but if everybody agrees with Sangli, I'll go with Sangli. Now that's a very different situation where you have expressed a view mildly and constructively as compared to somebody who comes and says, you know, all the numbers show that this acquisition is a hugely risky one. And our balance sheet can ill afford that risk, but nonetheless I want to go ahead. And you sit there and say, okay, if you are the promoter and you say so, that's fine. This is the difference I make. And there, you must thump the table. And I was on the board of a company where the company which was in the steel business wanted to get into telecom. And one of the directors said, no way. I don't care whether the promoter wants it or if somebody else wants it. And he prevented that from happening, and in hindsight, I think he did right.
That's interesting. In fact, for those of you who are interested, Arthur Haley's last book, called Strong Medicine, has about three and a half pages on discussions in a boardroom on exactly what he said. They want to set up a new plant. Should it be set up in the United States, which is the home of the company, or in the UK, which is where scientists of the appropriate background and expertise reside? And it's a fascinating discussion, those three and a half pages. Of course, like American boards, the language is somewhat rough, and therefore there's no quarter asked, none given. But the way the decision emerges out of that is fascinating. I don't see those conversations in Indian boardrooms. You tend to hold back. If you want to make a statement, somebody else holds back. In fact, one of my major achievements as a director is that after I joined a board, about 2-3 meetings later, I told the chairman of the board, somebody was making a presentation and he was making no progress because everyone was firing questions at him. He had 30 pages and he was at page 3 or 4 and unable to make progress. So I told the chairman, I was a newbie on the board, so I didn't know the practices in the board. I said, why don't we let him finish and hold back our questions and ask? I was told, you are preventing the board from benefiting from my knowledge. I said that knowledge can come half an hour later after he's made the presentation. But when we adjourned for lunch, I was told by a very senior director, somebody many years older than me, he said, do you know what you have done after you joined the board? You have reduced the airtime taken by the chairman from 98% to 96%. And that I regard as one of my significant achievements in the boardroom, which brings me to a question. Some people become chairman either because they are the senior most or their family members or what. Should there not be intensive training on how to lead a board if a board is to actually lead the company?
You know, if you're already the director of the company,
yes,
and you've been a director for some time, putting you through classroom sessions by somebody may not be the best. You should be wise enough by that time.
Yeah.
When I became a director, nobody trained me. But I went and bought Ramcharan's book, this book, that book. I talked to a few secretaries, a few accountants, and learnt it. And if you're becoming the chairman...
But to chair a board.
Yeah.
So being a director is another ball game altogether.
No, but Ramcharan writes very clearly. His books are very good. By the way, I'm not pretending that I've written a book which is an Indian Ramcharan book, but it is not dissimilar. How to make effective boards is what I've written, because I would hope that I've taken more Indian examples where people can relate with it. An outgoing chairman or his own observations of previous chairman should be a good indication. But if he does not take the initiative to do a bit of reading, talking with other people, then you will have to put him through a training course. When I became a director, I went out and asked people. I said, what the hell is a director do? You know, is he responsible, not responsible, accountable, not accountable? And then I was given various opinions, and then I was directed to read some books, not directed, suggested to read some books. So I became self-taught, so maybe I'm a bit more on the self-taught at that stage. But if you're the first-time director or first time you become chairman, or if you're on a family-managed business where your dad has been there and he has finally moved on and you are only 35, then maybe some training is required. Because the chairman is not the chairman of the company, he's the chairman of the board.
Board, yes.
And the management is in charge of the company. We sometimes lose that perspective.
I had this conversation with the legendary chairman. And after we were running a program for directors and he decided to participate. He was well past the biblical 70, but decided that he would participate. And as we adjourned for lunch, he said, look, I have been under a misapprehension. I thought I was the chairman of the company. You're now telling me I'm only the chairman of the board. I said, yes, the managing director is the managing director of the company. You're chairman of the board. Because your job is very simple. Management runs the company, you ensure that the company is run well.
Right.
That is your job, nothing more than that. But he was a hands-on man. I think at the drop of a hat, roll up the sleeves, get into the trenches, that kind of leader. So that also upsets the dynamics, the equilibrium of the board. And hence I ask this question, do they need not to be trained in the sense of make somebody sit down there, give them some material and conduct exams, nothing of that kind. Just sharing with them maybe 10, 15, 20 examples of where some boards have underperformed, sometimes even blown up, because the leadership at the board level was not good, and some of the boards where a collective leadership emerges, but the chairman doesn't lose sight of the fact that end of the day, if there is a problem, he has to. The other issue I wanted to raise with you is Reserve Bank of India circulars. Nobody from the Reserve Bank here, past, present? No. Future maybe, some of you might get in there, okay. Reserve Bank of India circulars seem to suggest that the minute you have a difference of opinion, you should record your dissent. How does that work? My entire thesis is you have debate, discussion, dialogue, deliberations. Dissent comes at the end of the thing. If nothing else works, and my personal view is, if it's a violation of law or regulation, or it is a clear indication of something being done not in the interest of the company, and you're unable to persuade the others, dissent by all means. But otherwise, rushing to dissent seems to be something that's being pushed. How does the board function as a collective in that case?
Yeah, this is the example of, I don't know the Reserve Bank regulation, I'm not familiar with it.
You're a lucky man.
It is an example of
We had a deputy governor yesterday here.
I see.
Who was telling us how the world is going to be a better place courtesy the Reserve Bank of India. So anyway,
I've sent a copy of my book to the governor of the Reserve Bank because he gives a lot of speeches on what independent directors should do. So I thought I would offer that as a small contribution, if at all it is. I do agree with you. In the book we have described 7 Ds. Starts with describe, which is a French word which means get engaged with the subject. And it ends with disclose. The one before disclose is depart. And it says you have to escalate your dissent in a calibrated manner. I mean, you should put your thing in Sangli, put in the board meeting, I oppose Sangli. I mean, that's ridiculous. But, you want something which is done which is on the border of unethicality, I don't agree with it, that is a dissent. So I agree with you. And I don't know the context of the Reserve Bank thing. You're not asking me to comment on that.
No, the Reserve Bank has been voted in the world's best governor at this point of time. And those in the press that criticized a history graduate for going there now realize he's made history. He's actually the...
By the way, Enron and Satyam were both voted as the best governed companies, and next week something happened. So I'm not saying this as the Reserve Bank, but...
No, Enron, I will tell you 2 things. Since you're a Tata man, I was present when the Tatas did their code of conduct refresh. I was present at that function, and I mentioned to them that it might seem like a minor detail. They said, we have 32 pages of detail on this. I said, don't go by the page numbers. Enron had 64. So don't go by that. And Enron, incidentally, when Arthur Levitt was chair of the SEC, he put out a new accounting requirement. Enron was one of those who wrote back immediately saying, we have the best board, we have the best auditors, we have the best practices, we have this, that, and the other. Why do we need this new rule? It was exactly 7 months before Enron blew up. And all the bests disappeared at that time. So I don't know whether having these larger-than-life people, packing them there, and then they turn a blind eye. And I was asked this question once at one of the IIMs. We were speaking on the Satyam problem, but that was not what was interesting to that guy. He said, you've been a former regulator and you had created a problem for us. So what is that problem? I was a little taken aback. I thought we were discussing Raju's peccadillos and not my problems, right? So what is the problem? He says, before you brought in these independent directors, this institution of independent directors, we used to look at how the company was being run to the best that we could do. Then you brought these independent directors and we thought they were batting on our behalf, so we took the eyes off the ball. And we find these guys have also gone to sleep in the boardroom, so you've created a problem by appointing independent directors. So what is attempted as a solution often becomes a problem that you need to press. What I will do is, I notice I'm looking at the clock, in the previous sessions we have not left enough time for audience questions. You are now in the presence of a person who is applying a lot of time, effort, thought into how to make boards better, how to make directors better, etc. Don't lose the opportunity, 20 minutes. I'll take your questions. I have 2 ground rules. You have to identify yourself by name and then don't make a comment. We'll leave that to the panelists. Ask a question. Who wants to get started? Okay, yeah. Tirthankar. Oh, I thought you were asking, Mr. George, yes.
I'm George. Sir, unfortunately, it's a comment, but very relevant.
No, it doesn't matter.
You are telling about training to the chairman. INSEAD runs a program called Leading the Chair. I was attended it 2 years back. Only chairmen are called 2-day program. It was extremely good. I found it very useful. One interesting thing I said, we are managing conflicts in the boardroom every time. And the most important takeaway for me was that as a chair, you should close the issue between the directors at the end of the day, before the board session is over. If there has been argument, settle it, then only you can run it smooth. I think your point, I agree with. That's all. Thank you.
No, I think you made a very valid point. But there are some chairmen who create the conflict in order to demonstrate their conflict resolution abilities. We shouldn't travel down that path. We need to be careful about that. Any comment on that? He's talking about training the chair. Right? He's an award winner in governance, incidentally. Yes. Yes, Jairaj. Before you come in, I've always been a backbencher in my life. I think Devashish.
The lady has been putting up her hand.
And then come to you. Who's asking questions?
Yeah, in the front.
I'm unable to see somebody.
Here, in the middle. On the left.
Oh yeah, please, go
Can I
ahead.
start?
Deepthi, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I'm Deepthi Neelkantan. So you've been obviously very closely associated with all managements in the course of your work and also on the board of various companies. My biggest, I think, observation has been with the limited time that the boards are able to spend, even if it is 2-day meetings and whatever, the information that they can discuss is what is presented to them. And we provide for all behavioral noticing and all that. How do we train, or are there any SOPs that probably are developed by mature groups like Tata's, where managements are also taught or they are given certain guidance as to the material that must be presented to the board? Because very often one hears from board members 2 things. One is the agenda is so big, we don't have time to read. Second is, we do not want to see matters which do not concern us. So if you are a conglomerate, for example, and you are telling me information about the subsidiary companies, which has its own board with independent directors, why am I being told about this? I don't want to know about it. So there is I think, presumed protection by saying this data wasn't given to me. How do we deal with these situations?
That's an excellent question. And I will narrate an experience rather than pontificate about it. There was one company where the CEO would come and say, I propose, not a stitch of paper, maybe one chart. I propose that we spend 1,500 crores, we'll buy this company, we'll merge it, we'll do this, we'll do that, and I'm seeking the board's approval, and the company secretary has put a resolution appropriately. And as a board member, I said, I don't know, I'm not used to this 1500 crores. I mean, if it's 15 lakhs, one can take a view and say, okay, carry on. So, and other board members agreed. So the next time, he sent a truck to each director's house with papers which they could not even carry to the boardroom, either due to disability or age, as the case may be. So I wasn't the chairman of that company. The chairman of the board, I happened to be present. Had a conversation saying, hey, listen, you're a CEO of a fairly large company. Use your judgment a little bit. When a director tells you he doesn't get enough information, you next send him a truckload of stuff. He said, well, you tell me what you want, you'll get it. This attitude went on after several counseling sessions. Did we do nothing about it? We fired him. It was couched in different words. So it didn't hit the headlines.
Showed him the exit door.
Showed him the exit door. So that's one example, that if you can't even be sensitive and put yourself in the shoes, I mean, you're a managing director of a large public listed company and you can't understand a conversation with the chairman of the board, then maybe you shouldn't be there, because you're really saying, you guys know nothing about my business. If I tell you nothing, you're saying you're telling me nothing. If I tell you something, you're saying you're telling me too much. You tell me what forms you want, I'll fill it up and send it to you. That's not the kind of CEO we wanted. So that's one extreme example. But I must say there are many other examples where out of such a conversation, we assign one of our colleagues who says, I am prepared to sit with you and say how it is done in some other board. And this is the information you have. That's a constructive engagement, and that also works. But the dilemma continues. How many charts, how many... I know in one board even said, no chart should have more than
5 lines.
5 lines or something like that, some such guideline. And the poor person, in my Mahabharata example, I have started the book with a Mahabharata example, where I have taken KP Enterprises, Kaurava Pandava Enterprises, as having a board comprised of Dhritarashtra as the chairman, and Sanjaya, who is available, company secretary, but who doesn't tell him too much unless he's asked, and Duryodhana is the managing director, and Yudhishthira is the CFO, and so on. I have described it in the book. And in that sort of an example, I think it's very important to be having a constructive engagement, because somebody talked about conflict, that the role of the chairman is to resolve the conflict, not to promote it, but to accept that that's a reality. And I think it's very important to engage constructively. We can't work on the basis that every CEO is obstreperous, obstinate. That is a silly way to go about it. We all have different ways of doing things. And it is that sensitivity in behavior. A guy who's joined a board wants to contribute. I mean, it is unfair to assume that he's there just to sort of have a few stripes on his epaulette. So, most conflicts are resolved through engagement, not through fatwas. That's not some special corporate thing, it's in politics.
Fatwas don't resolve
conflicts.
They put a lid on it, actually.
They actually promote it.
Devashish Mohanty. After that, Jairaj.
So my question was...
and then, sorry, and I'll get to you after that. Yeah, okay.
My question was somewhat linked to what Madam has asked. See, when in the previous meetings also, that questions of information asymmetry, insufficiency or overload, is it that difficult for the directors to ask the right questions which will unravel, piercing and exact answer that either the managing director will respond, or then you will know whether he is supporting or registering. So that information, whatever you want, you can ask and see the response of the team whether they are cooperating or not. Is that difficult to find out the exact requisite questions to be framed?
They referred to information asymmetry, I think, in the last session. You don't know how asymmetrical it is. And when you don't know the subject, how do you know what to ask? I'll give you an example. You're all very talented, corporate, accomplished people. If I ask you to come and ask me the right questions about what's happening in Uganda, you will not even know. You say, tell me something about Uganda before I ask you questions. And believe me, If you spent all your life in a soap company counting the number of bubbles that come out of shaking your hands in it, then if you're put into a motor car company, you are at a loss. So it is difficult. After several years of experience, maybe you'll be better.
I hope you got your answer, Jairaj. You want to ask something? Yeah. I've noted that your hand is up, but we have enough time now. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Speak. Yeah.
Gopal, for me, the essence of what you have put in your book are the play on three key terms: niyam, niti, and niyat. And in the context of explaining why some boardrooms are ineffective as opposed to others, perhaps as a takeaway for all of us, you can dwell a little bit more on these three terms.
Let me try to be brief about it so that the trouble with having written a book is if somebody asks you a good question, you feel like spending the rest of the time. You know, everybody around the boardroom must be assumed to be convergent on the niyati of the company. Niyati is progress, the goodness, the bhalai of the company. In order to assure the niyati of the company, you need three things. Directors and management need to assess what is the niyat. Niyat is an Arabic word, niya, which is an Arabic word, is come into Hindi. Niyat is strategic intent. What do you really want to do out of this? Niti is conduct. What is your behavior? And niyam are the rules that follow. All the corporate governance training courses, which are very valuable and must continue, by the way, nobody should think I'm banging them on the head, is focused on the niyam. But you as a director need to think of, since all of us are convergent on the niyati of the company, what is the niti of the so-called promoter, a word which I don't particularly like, but it is there, so I'll use it. Now, imagine that you are in the board of a company where somebody has become chairman and you know his tenure is 2 years. He just wants to get out unscathed. That's one type of chairman you may find. There's another type of chairman who may say, I want to make my mark in 2 years. There's a third type of chairman who will say, what can you do in 2 years? Let it be. None of them are bad chairmen. They're just different approaches. But that tells you the niyat and what will happen in that boardroom. Niyat, niti, and niyam. So that's what I have said in the book. And I have found it very valuable to guess the niyat of the promoter. There's some promoter, I know in one company, I won't mention a name, the promoter chairman, I'm using the word which everybody understands it, just before the nominations and remuneration committee, he called the chairman of the nominations committee. He's not a member of it. And he said, by the way, the profits of the company have been calculated and whatever you can pay as commission to the directors has been calculated to be something, 2.5 crores. I just thought I should let you know that the 2.5 crores should be distributed by 2 crores to me. And the balance 50 lakhs to the other 7 directors. The person who told me this said, yes sir, 3 bags full. I didn't want to be judging him and telling him that he shouldn't have done that. But that's what I mean by niyat. When you see a pot of honey in every beehive, then it becomes questions your niyat.
But he's very generous. Only he wanted 2 crores out of 2.5. I know a company where there was an increase, let's say X%, let's call it 100. And all the directors were told that, and the directors were in a very happy mood because that was a company which was paying token compensation. And then we discovered that 2 family members of the board walked away with 95% of that increased amount, 5% being left to seven other directors. Tirthankar.
These are the kind of things that if you're a thinking director, you can influence. And whether you choose to make it a matter of principle, if you're scared to raise it because you may be eased out of the board, it's a possibility. But I always, since I've referred to the Mahabharata in the opening of my book, we are coming to the end of our session, I'll refer to Ramayana. When Vibhishana wanted to tell Ravana that it's wrong to kill Hanuman. Hanuman, yes. Because the whole court was baying for the beheading of Hanuman. He had to tell him that this is against the laws of diplomacy and governance. So he started by praising Ravana. Ravana, you're such a learned man. You know so many, you got so many boons from so many gods. It doesn't behove you to fall foul of Article 123. And as you know, Hanuman was saved. But then his career suffered after that. Vibhishana's career suffered after that. Okay?
Sir, I think what we have seen in the last 1.5 days is Tirthankar here, sir. I'm from the National Stock Exchange. Corporate governance, especially boards, directors, this is not an easy cup of tea for everyone. My question is on scalability, sir. I mean, not everybody can read Ramcharan's books. Some people will take, a lot of people I hope will take efforts, I myself included, to read your book. But we have hundreds of companies coming into the listed space now. And first I needed your thoughts on how does corporate governance move when we move beyond the top 500 companies. What happens? There are thousands of companies beyond there also. And what are your thoughts on how this can be scaled up? How do we get a culture of corporate governance in the long tail, sir, for the country?
That's a fantastic question. Just a few stats. It is sometimes useful to throw it in. India has 63 million enterprises. Just comprehend, 63 million. This is as per the government's MSME, SME, some ministry. Of these, how many have turnover more than 10 crores? I'm talking of turnover, 19,000. Out of the 19,000, how many are listed on the stock exchange? 5,000. Out of the 5,000, how many are actively traded by your venerable institution? 2,000. Out of the 2,000, how many account for 80% of the market cap? 3 digits. So we are a land of a lot of pygmies with very few, and a few giraffes and a few elephants. We need to democratize our corporate capitalism and governance. It's a long journey. And I am certainly, in my dreaming, at my age I'm allowed to dream. Dreams won't last forever, but while it lasts, pushing the agenda that we have to create companies that learn to scale up business along with governance, and what is the framework for that? It's a very small contribution, but since you asked the question, I'm telling you.
But there's one thing we need to guard against, which is to equate size and the quality of governance.
Yep.
The size of a company is no guarantee that it is well governed, and we've seen the big companies being caught with their pants down in any case. Whereas there are mid-cap companies which are very well run. I think there are 2 questions here. Somebody from
Lata,
here.
Lata.
Yeah, Lata, go ahead.
The irrepressible Lata.
Yes.
I don't know how companies choose boards. Do board members who are troublesome like journalists, are they kept out? I mean, you don't even invite them? Or do you see a pattern? Do promoter-run companies, do you find them more keeping difficult people at bay? Are professionals-led and now we have many private equities buying, promoters up. Are they more open to independent directors or those who are genuinely, whose niti is independent? What is the behavior of companies when they choose board members?
Lata, like the energetic journalist that you are, you have touched upon a very, very key root cause. Now I am expressing an opinion, and many of you may not agree with me, but it's only an opinion. I believe that most of us, most human beings, most institutions don't want interference and kitpit. So I don't blame it whether promoter or even professionally run companies. यार ज़्यादा बहस करने वाला नहीं बुलाओ यार, manage करो, okay? It's like the daughter-in-law that you seek in your family. You want her to do a cooking, but you don't want her to keep her to the house, but you want her to quit her job. You know, you have all these deep-rooted ideas in your head. I don't know, I can't comment on journalists specifically, but one of the things that I have found useful. Yeah. If somebody has a reputation of being an inconvenient pest, it is true that that person's chance of getting invited to a board
is less.
I can't change the algorithm of how people think. Just like if somebody is known to be a very troublesome girl, you're unlikely to aspire to get her into your house as a daughter-in-law or son-in-law for that matter. So what I have found useful to do, even at the risk of some expense, and I'm doing this in companies, the few companies left where I am still there, is to employ a headhunter, give them the specification, allow anybody else to make suggestions, and tell them to do like you search for a vice president or a, supply chain vice president. I think it brings some objectivity that I don't bring my old classmate, who's a wonderful man, by the way, like all classmates are. But yes, if you got an image of being pesky and difficult, I'm afraid it doesn't count.
We have time for one more question. I think the gentleman in the middle asked. His hand has been up for a long time, yes. If he makes it a brief question, you'll get your chance. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for the session. Wonderful insights. This
Hold
is
it
Anand.
close. Hold it closer.
Yeah, thank you for the wonderful session, sir. This is Anand Narayan. Sir, my question is particularly related to the theme. One of the main aims of the corporate governance is to protect the interest of the investors. Now, of late, we have also seen that though we have a very stringent corporate governance norm, but we have been seeing that the damage has already happened, and particularly the small investors, the relief basically to the small investors have kicked in quite late. So I just wanted to know your thoughts and pick your brains on this as to how do you think the regulator and also the board should evolve themselves to protect the interest of the retail investors particularly in the real time. Thank you, sir.
If I've understood your question, you're saying how can the board function to protect the interests of a small shareholder? Is that your question?
He mentioned investors, but I imagine he meant the entire ecosystem. Yeah.
See, the first rule of investment is you're investing with your eyes open and your ears open to take risk. So it could be up, it could be down. That's on the part of the investor. So he carries that can, he or she carries that can. The responsibility of the board is to be accountable for that valuation, because investment bankers and merchant bankers will come and tell you their respective findings. If I take TCS as an example, I was on the board of Tata Sons at that time, and the price was fixed at 1,000, 1,050, it always is a range. And it is to Ratan Tata's credit that he said, don't you think we should leave something on the table for the retail investor? But not everybody is a Ratan Tata. So we finally came with the IPO at 950, because he said we are doing this IPO not to quickly Tata Sons to get its money. In fact, Tata Sons is not offering its shares. We are doing this IPO so that our grandchildren will have a much larger company. I remember the words. Well, that's happened. TCS, 950 is I don't know how many times now. So that can be the role of a promoter or board to do that. But what becomes really suspect is when the promoter pumps it up. I mean, there is a well-known IPO which was supposed to come with 3,200 rupees, which is now sitting at 2,200 rupees. Nobody is able to find out what happened. Those are the ones that are dangerous. Luckily, that was stopped by some other events that happened. And all of us know what
I think we've run out of time. I'm using television anchors language. We've run out of time, but King Shuk, in 10 seconds frame your question and you'll get a 20-second answer. Right, yeah.
So my name is King Shuk Ganguly. My question is courage,
Is
contextual?
courage contextual?
Courage in the boardroom.
Courage in the boardroom in the spirit of independent director.
Well, I don't want to get into a long explanation of courage because that's the danger of trying to answer your question. But since your name is Kingshu Ganguly, Jodi kehu to dark shune na ashe to akla cholo re.
Correct. Khub bhalo bolechi.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
This is Rabindranath who said if nobody listens to your call, walk alone.
Ekla chalo re.
Now that's 20 seconds, sir. I've delivered.
Yes. Very good.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for a truly thought-provoking final session. We've got the caricature and the certificate for the 10 trees that are going to be planted in your name, sir, in the Sundarbans.
Don't use this for the purpose that you said. I won't tell them that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Damodaran, for presenting the memento and the caricature.
We have to stand together for photograph. Yes.
Thanking Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan
Thank you.
for his time.
Thank you.
Right here. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you for having been with us since yesterday. We are now at the concluding part of the Gatekeepers of Governance, and it's been a very informative, energizing 2 days of deliberations. Mr. Damodaran for the closing remarks.
I don't want to hold you back from lunch. Just 2 or 3 minutes. One, you've been a wonderful audience. We haven't had time to make it more participatory than we would have liked to. But there's always hope that next time round we'll get more time for audience questions. We tried our best in the last session. Do write with your suggestions, your comments, what changes you want, so that next time we can factor in some of those when we design and structure the program, right? We don't know the date yet, but shortly after lunch we will engage with the management of the hotel to finalize next year's dates, and you will get information sufficiently in advance. Mr. George is clapping because he has to come from Chennai for this, okay. So that your calendars get appropriately blocked. Right. Thank you very much, and it's always good to see familiar faces. Thank you, Lord. Thank you. Upstairs at Orloff and Cullinan, where we went yesterday.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, a reminder, like Sir just said, lunch is being served on the second level at Orloff and Cullinan on the second level. With that, we bring down the curtains on this year's summit. My name is Keisha Lobo. Thank you for being an amazing audience.